From the Bureau of Internal Revenue, we have Juanito H. Balbastre III and Miss Amelita Escobar. From the National Economic and Development Authority, we have Assistant Director Richard Emerson D. Ballester and Miss Irene Angela V. Cuya. From the Board of Investments, we have Attorney Eligene D.C. Portoza. From Clark Development Corporation, we have Attorney Agnes De Vanatera and Attorney Gail Barin. From the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Incorporated, we have Attorney Michael Montero. From the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Philippines Incorporated, we have Mr. Shigeru Shimoda. From the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, we have Mr. Tereso O. Panga. From Chevron Philippines Incorporated, we have Attorney Ruth Santiago Loyola. From the Philippine Exporters Confederation Incorporated, we have Mr. Oscar A. Barrera. From the Semiconductor and Electronics Industries in the Philippines Foundation Incorporated, we have Dr. Danilo Lachica. From the Confederation of Wearable Exporters of the Philippines, we have Ms. Rosarito Carillo. And from the Action for Economic Reforms, we have Ms. Ella Leliamo. That will be all, Your Honor.
Thank you, Committee Secretary. Today we'll be hearing three items, three Senate resolutions that were filed. One is Senate Resolution 567, entitled "The Resolution Directing the Committee on Ways and Means to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the apparent inconsistency between the provision of the CREATE law granting incentives to registered business enterprise vis-a-vis its implementing rules and regulations and other issuances issued in relation thereto." And then authored by yours truly. And then Senate Resolution 244, entitled "A Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Ways and Means to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the imposition of the value-added tax on importation and local purchases of goods and services directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity of domestic market enterprises in special economic zones," authored by Senator Aquilino Pimentel III. And the last resolution that will be tackled today is Senate Resolution 219, resolution calling for the Senate to convene the Congressional Oversight Committee on the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program for the purpose of remediating the apparent inconsistency between the CREATE law and its implementing rules and regulations. So basically, all three resolutions talks about one thing: the inconsistency between the law and the IRR. The last Senate Resolution 219 is authored by Senator Rizzo Hontiveros. The resolution by Senator Hontiveros called for the convening of the Congressional Oversight Committee on the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program. Unfortunately, the House hasn't manifested the members of this joint oversight committee. In the Senate, we have already manifested our members so that we can convene this joint oversight committee. However, the House has done so. So the Senate Ways and Means Committee, through its inherent powers, will conduct motu proprio an oversight over the implementation of the CREATE law. Today, aside from the three resolutions that we'll be covering, we recognize the presence of Senator Raffy Tulfo. Good morning, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Today, aside from the three resolutions that we'll be covering, we plan to cover the implementation of the CREATE law, particularly on the operations of FIRB, the expanded operations of FIRB, particularly also focusing on the incentives that were given and being given to businesses and potential investors that are coming into the country. At the same time, we also want to see the cost-benefit analysis of these incentives. As we all know, CREATE is a reform that was implemented during the last administration, and the reform aims to streamline, simplify, put performance-based, time-bound mechanisms into the grant of incentives. So, so we want to look at the benefit that the country is that the country is enjoying through the grant of these incentives. So we want to learn that. We also invited stakeholders who are already operating in the Philippines, and also organizations that are geared towards inviting potential investors to come to our country. And these organizations have vast experiences in terms of operating in the country, as well as how to use incentives to make their products and services competitive. And hopefully in the future we can use that selling point of competitiveness to attract future investors to the country. But admittedly, the law is far from perfect. We have a lot of challenges, a lot of inconsistencies, as what the resolutions pointed out, a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of issues, and a lot of real challenges. And we want to discuss that and hear it from the stakeholders themselves, no? Because the stakeholders are obviously the frontliners. They're also in touch with real companies who are operating here in our country. So we want to hear their thoughts and their challenges and the issues that they are facing in terms of operating and on terms of requesting for incentives to be granted. However, the update on the implementation of CREATE and the issues are not in the, admittedly, are not in the agenda. So we will issue later on a supplemental agenda so that we will cover the update on the implementation of CREATE and also the issues. But since the three resolution covers the inconsistency, and we also invited the stakeholders here. We will talk about the inconsistency first, and then segue into the issues and challenges. And then on the third part, we will talk about the updates on the grant of incentives, as well as the cost-benefit analysis. We might not finish all of these things today, no? Because I think the issues and challenges are quite heavy, and we have a lot of things to cover. If we will not cover it today, then we can talk about the updates on a later hearing. So with that, we're very honored and privileged that we're joined by Senator Raffy Tulfo. And any opening statements, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason why I attended today's hearing, kasi nakita ko sa resolution, nabanggit doon special economic zone. And that's where I'm very interested in. Kasi po, ginagago tayo for the longest time nitong mga locator sa special economic zone. And I'll tell you later how and why. Mr. Chair, meron ba tayo na-invite dito ng mga taga Bureau of Customs? Kasi Bureau of Customs and BIR are conniving para mag-proliferate itong mga bogus na locators. And they're not paying taxes. They import products, raw materials, free of duties and taxes, with the precondition that those raw materials will be re-exported. But hindi po na-re-export. Paper export lang po ang nangyari. And then, binibenta dito locally yung mga finished product, or sometimes yung raw materials. And yung mga importers, supposed to be, kikita yung bayan natin dahil sa kanilang income tax. Pero paano? Namomonitor ba ng BIR? Itong mga may-ari ng locators? How does the BIR monitors these locators? Kasi the only time that we make money, the country makes money is through the income tax being paid by these locators. In fact, I have list here of some companies na may violation na sa BIR, and I need to know ano na ang nangyari sa mga kasong ito. And I need from the BIR a list of these locators na padalahan ng LOA, Letter of Authority. Ano ang follow-up? May nangyari ba o nagkaaregluhan? Ang LOA, Mr. Chair, dito nagiging talamak ang korupsyon. Pinapadala ng sulat ang earring company o locator para pumunta sa opisina ng BIR, magpakita ng mga dokumento na siya ay nagbayad at nag-comply sa requirement ng BIR para magbayad ng tamang buwis. At pagdating doon sa BIR, nagkakaregluhan. That's why I need a list of those companies that were issued LOA and what happened to it. I need a list of those. And then, gusto ko rin po malaman kung meron ng mga nakasuhan na napadala ng letter of authority. Meron na bang nakasuhan o hanggang warning lamang? Kung may nakasuhan, anong nangyari sa kasong yon? Another issue, Mr. Chair, na gusto ko i-raise ay yung ukay-ukay na pumapasok sa PEZA, Special Economic Zone, declared as raw materials to make rugs or to recycle rugs. Pero wag ka, ang laman noon, ukay-ukay. Libre sa buwis. Ni singkong duling walang binabayad na buwis. And then, mind you, yung ukay-ukay na yon, those are discarded second-hand or used clothing sa ibang bansa, Hong Kong, Japan, US, Canada, Australia. Yung po yung mga basura na ng mga damit na imbis na i-recycle, meron kasi mga scheduled for discarding used clothing sa iba't ibang bansa at pinipick up para i-recycle, pero instead na i-recycle, pinapadala itong basura. We have PD 2033 in 1986 na sinasabing bawal ang pagpasok ng used clothing sa bansa. We have RA 4653 na sinasabing bawal ang pagpasok ng mga used clothing sa bansa except to donate sa mga victims ng calamities. At bakit nagkalat itong ukay-ukay sa iba't ibang parte ng Pilipinas? And BIR and Customs not doing about it. May kinikita ba tayo BIR? Alam niyo ba kung sinong pumapasok, nagpapasok nito mga ukay-ukay? Ni singkong duling, wala kinikita tayo dito. That's why I passed a resolution, a bill na para buwesan na itong ukay-ukay para pagkakitaan naman ng ating gobyerno. But for now, I challenge the BOC and the BIR do something. Kaya nga pinagbawal yan, alam niyo itong batas na ito, dahil it can cause diseases. Those are used clothing. Yun ay mga tinapon na sa basurahan. Tinapon na yan sa dumpsters. At pinulot ng mga magagaling na Pilipino sa ibang bansa at may contact sila para i-ship dito libre. Ito po, Mr. Chair. I need to ask the BIR directly right now. Victoria Wave Special Economic Zone dyan sa may Caloocan. And in October 2021, July 13, excuse me, pumunta po yung mga taga-BIR para inspect itong binanggit kong kumpanya dahil sa tad na violation. Ang tanong, ano na nangyari doon sa pagbisita ng BIR noong July 13 dito sa company ito, OPMC? Meron ba isang matapang dito? Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Senator Rafi. I apologize, Your Honor. We don't have the information right now, but we are already asking the concerned revenue district office, which conducted the the investigation to provide us information, and we will provide the committee once the data or information are available.
Meron pang isa. Si Commissioner Romeo Lumagul Jr., he was the one who inspected the factories inside the One Subic Premier Manufacturing Corporation. Okay? At marami siyang nakitang tad-tad na violation. What happened to that inspection? Anong naging resulta? Show it to us. Show it to us na hindi moro-moro lang yung ginawa niyang mga inspeksyon. Kasi Mr. Chair, meron po ako suggest. Siguro it's about time the Congress and the Senate should have an oversight committee na lahat ng LOA na ini-issue ng BIR at Bureau of Customs, kinakailangan monitored natin. Kasi dito sa letter of authority, ang kumikita lamang yung earring officials, yung earring companies na napadala ng LOA at yung agency nag-issue ng LOA. Example, Mr. Chair. Ang deficiency is 1 million. For the sake of argument, lilitan ko lang. 1 million, papadala ng LOA. Magre-report kayo na padala ng LOA. Sasabihin, boss, yung 1 million hindi ko kaya, etc., etc. Sasabihin ng agency nagpadala ng LOA, magkano kaya mo? Boss, ang kaya ko lang is 20,000. Dagdagan mo, boss, ang kaya ko lang 100, last. O sige, yung 900 discounted na. Pero yung 100,000, 50 for you and 50 for the government. Maghati yung agency at kung sino man nagpadalang LOA at sasabihin yung kalahati, kahit papaano, may resibo, kikita ang gobyerno. Ganon po yung kalokohan sa LOA. Alam niyo po itong taga-BIR at taga-Bureau of Customs. That's the reason what I would like to happen, Mr. Chair, you being the chairman committee, and I'm being the vice, na dapat magkaroon na talaga. Sir, excuse me, I'm talking. Paano ko ma-concentrate, sir, kung nagsalita ka na ano ako? Okay. Well, then, you want to talk? Go ahead, sir. Okay. Sa Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Chair, siguro it's about time mag-create tayo ng tinatawag na oversight to make sure lahat po ng LOA ay legit, hindi po ginagamit para lamang mangikil, para magamit lamang sa korupsyon. And we have a member of the PEZA here, Mr. Terezo. Okay. Ano po kayo dun sa PEZA?
Sir, I am the Director General of PEZA.
Ilan po ang locator sa PEZA ninyo?
There's about more than 3,000 locators.
3,000. Now, don't tell me, dyan sa 3,000 locators ninyo, walang violators dyan na flag down ng customs at BIR. Don't tell me. Meron, tama, mali.
Well, we have been receiving copies of the laws issued by BIR and BOCs. So we're willing to
Kaya nga,
coordinate
so
with
what
them.
happened to those LOAs?
Wala pa akong feedback from the
See?
issuances.
You see, Mr. Chair? Ano na nga sa mga LOAs? Wala pang feedback. Wala pa kasi nagkaaregluhan na. At alam mo yung sinasabi kanina, Mr. Pangap, mag-import ng raw materials free of duties and taxes with the condition na yan i-re-export. At doon kikita ang gobyerno dahil magpa-file ng income tax yung may-ari ng locator. Kaya dapat BIR, lahat na may-ari ng locator, minomonitor ninyo. Yung ini-import ng, tuturuan ko kayo, kuha kayo ng ballpen at papel. Hindi ako nabibiro. Get a pencil and paper. Lahat na mga ini-import na mga locator, kasi free of duties and taxes yan. I'll give you an example. Mag-export ng 1 million worth of, say, tela para gawin ng long sleeve. Kasama sa tela dyan, kung ilang yarda, nandiyan yung butones, sinulid, etc. 1 million. 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 1 million Sa kondisyon yan ay i-re-export after na magawa na. Pero wag ka, hindi i-re-export yan. Kasi nga, wala nga naman talagang silang processing factory in the first place. At bakit na-aprobahan ng customs? Now, dapat yan, sa scheduled re-exporting ng finished product, nandyan dapat yung BIR, binubuksan yung container. Tama? At kung nakalusot man yan, yung may-ari ng locator, tatanungin mo, yung pinasok mo na worth 1 million na raw materials, may records dyan, may computation kayo dapat dyan, kung magkano yan kapag naging finished product na. Finished products, those materials. And then magkano maging income tax ng locator. Ganun lang po kasimple. Kaso, Mr. Chair, hindi nangyayari eh. Kaya dapat, it's time that we have to revisit our law regarding these locators because it's being abused. It's being abused. Meron pang isang locator dito sa may bandang Caloocan. Mr. Chair, paano tayo hindi ma-high blood dito, Mr. Chair? Libre ang importation ng kahit anong produkto. And then kapag nire-export, libre, exempted sa corporate tax. Sana ma. Saan ka nakita niyan? At pwede pa sila makadiscount sa mga empleyado. Andito lahat. We have to revisit this law that created these locators. Ulitin ko, libre tax, walang duties and taxes sa pagpasok ng raw materials para gawing finished product. Ang raw materials na yon. Pag na-export na, halimbawa talagang na-export, ang kikitain lang sana ng gobyerno sa income tax ng kumpanya na yon. Pero, in-exempt natin yung corporate income tax. And adding insult to injury, pati sa mga empleyado, allowed sila na magkaroon ng discount sa bayad. Pwede sila mag-underpay. Totoo yan. And I have proof. We have to revisit that law. Andito si Attorney Agnes de Venadera. Ma'am, kumusta po dyan sa SBMA? SBMA kayo, tama? Ay, sorry, Clark.
Sa Clark
tama?
po. Sa Clark po.
So, ilan na po ang mga na-issuean ng LOA dyan sa Clark sa pagkakaalam nyo?
Mr. Senator, wala po akong hawak na listahan. Pero alam ko pong merong nai-issuehan. Kaya lang po, hindi po, I have to be very candid na wala po ako nung listahan.
Kaya nga, pero di ba dapat, ma'am, pag merong mga na-issuean, mga violators dyan, you should be concerned and you should be updated. Para malaman mo kung sino dyan mga hausyaw or mga illegal. And then that's where you have to act. Kung nakita nyo na ito, paulit-ulit na na-issue ng LOA, and then something must be wrong with this locator, and then I have to cancel his locator permit. Am I right? Or am I right?
Mr. Senator, doon po sa Clark Development Corporation, meron po kaming division, yung TFD na sinasabi namin, and they are in charge of monitoring all the importations of raw materials. Yung po sinasabi nyo, tama po kayo doon. At meron din pong proseso na ginagawa yung aming TFD division para po makita kung ang raw materials na inimport ay naipasok dun sa finished products. Meron pong ganon. And in fact, Mr. Senator, we have on several occasions suspended the authority to operate, Mr. Senator.
Okay. Attorney De Venadera, marami sa mga locators nyo dyan sa Clark na wala silang processing factory. Right? You agree? Kasi pag sinabi mo you don't agree with me, then mapapahiya po kay madam.
Meron po kaming mga na-monitor na walang operations. At yung pong mga walang operations ay amin pong inaaksyonan na hindi mabigyan ng authority to operate kasi wala pong operations.
Salamat at hindi po kayo nagsinungaling. Kaya nga po, ang ibig sabihin, marami mga locators sa Pilipinas, sa different special economic zone, na nabigyan ng permit na hindi dapat sapagkat wala silang processing plant. Kasi ang condition yan, the raw materials are imported free of taxes and duties for you to process it into finished product para ma-re-export at kikita yung Pilipinas. Pero how can they process that when they don't have a planta? And alam yan, nyo dyan sa SBMA, alam ng BIR, alam ng Bureau of Customs. Naglulukuhan tayo. We have to stop this. Kailangan mo imbestigahan talaga to, Mr. Chair. Itong mga free special economic zone, dito po talamak, billions and billions of pesos every year ang nawawala sa gobyerno, andyan sa special economic zone. Ang kumikita lang yung mga smuggler at ilan mga taga-customs at BIR. Mr. Chair, sana po magkaroon pa ng isang hearing na next time patawag po natin ang Bureau of Customs. Last question na lang po sa mga taga-BIR since nandito kayo. Ilan na po ang mga LOA na issue ninyo sa mga locators? How many LOAs? Magkano pong pinakamataas na diferensya? At ano po nangyari doon? I need a list.
Mr. Chair,
Can you provide us?
Senator Rafi, we will include that information po when we submit the requested information next hearing or as soon as possible. As soon as
And then
we get the information.
You should have a list of all the locators in the whole Philippines.
Yes, yes, sir.
Libo yan. So, ang tanong ko sa iyo, meron ba kayong way para ma-monitor kung ilan itong mga locators na ito, nasaan sila?
The investment promotion agencies are mandated to submit the list of locators in their respective jurisdictions. So we can have that list, Your Honor.
And then, paano nyo po na-monitor na itong mga locators na ito ay nagbabayad ng buwis? Is there a way for you to monitor that?
Yes, sir. They are along with the one of the information that they have to submit to BIR are tax payments. So we can have that also.
Nadudoktor naman po yung tax payments. I'll tell you what, Mr. Balastre III, pag sa scheduled exportation nila ng kanilang finished products, alam naman ng Bureau of Customs, puntahan nyo, especially itong mga high-valued, sinasabing raw materials na pinasok ng walang tax na binayad. Yung scheduled exportation nila, puntahan nyo, pabuksan nyo yung container. 10 out of 10, walang laman yung container. Kung meron man, basura. Kaya ang tawag dyan, ghost exportation or paper exportation. Totoo yan. Halos karamihan, hindi na lumalabas ng bansa. Kung meron man, kalahati lang, pero yung kalahati, naibenta na sa labas. Watch out for those. Yan lang po muna, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tulfo, for that opening statement. Few items that you mentioned, and the committee will take note of the items that you mentioned in your opening remarks. In fact, I was just conferring with the head of our Senate Tax Research Office. Indeed, part of our powers in the oversight is to request for the letter of authority from the BIR. And in fact, in the past, I was advised that the LOAs are being submitted to the committee as part of its oversight functions. So,
Meron na tayong LOA, Mr. Chair. Meron na tayong oversight committee para sa mga LOA.
meron tayong oversight committee here in the Senate. There are two, no? The one prescribed by the law is a joint oversight. However, I mentioned earlier that was not created because the House has not yet manifested their members. So we created our own here in the Senate, no? Motu proprio, through the Senate Committee Ways and Means. And because of its function as oversight, the BIR regularly submits to the committee a list of that LOA that you mentioned earlier. And the latest submission was when? Okay. But in the past, they have submitted. So since you have manifested your request and desire for the BIR to submit a summary and a list of their LOA, we are instructing the BIR to submit to the committee a list of the letter of authority that were issued to date.
Mr. Chair, nabanggit nung, ang pangalan tong kasama natin?
Si head ho natin yan.
Sa head.
Oo, head ho natin yan. Ng
So,
STSRO.
meron ng mga sinabmit na LOA sa Senate. Nasaan yung mga LOA na yan? Can I see it? And then, I just need to look at it and then make a follow-up what happened to those LOAs. Kasi 9 out of 10 yung mga LOA na yon na-areglo na.
I was advised, Senator Tulfo, that the submission is in line with the compliance to the oversight. But since the oversight has not yet been convened, so there's no submission. But in the past,
okay.
the past Senate, yung mga dating Senate, it's been traditionally being submitted. No? So ngayon, since you've requested for that submission, we're now directing the BIR to submit all the LOA. Anong gusto nyo? Last 5 years?
Yes.
Last 3 years?
In the last 3 years, and then dapat meron tayong assigned na group of people na para gumawa po ng thorough follow-up. Ano nangyari sa mga LOA na yon? Magkano kinita ng gobyerno kung meron man out of those LOAs? At kung wala, then dapat may makasuhan.
That's also what I asked the head of our STSRO, that the LOA, submission of the LOAs is one thing, the analysis is the most important. No? So we're also directing the STSRO to analyze the submission and to give us their analysis as well as recommendation, and also furnish a copy of that analysis to the members of this committee.
Madali naman, Mr. Chair, madali lang naman yun eh. Halimbawa, pinadalang LOA si ABC Company dahil meron siyang deficiency worth, say, para mas mapabilis tayo, 1 million. Then, sasabihin natin sa BIR, ano nangyari sa LOA ni ABC nung pinadala such and such date, ano ang naging result? Magkano binayad niya para sa gobyerno? And I'm telling you, Mr. Chair, sa 1 million halimbawa, ang pumunta sa gobyerno, barya. Pero ang pumunta doon sa agency, people in that agency na nagpadalang LOA, yun yung dambuhalang pera ang pumasok sa kanilang bulsa. Na short change yung ating gobyerno. Kaya nga sinasabi ko yung LOA na yan, Mr. Chair, it's about time i-monitor natin sa Senate. Dahil dyan nagkakapera ang maraming loko-loko at the expense of our government. Kawawa naman ating gobyerno. Lalo dito sa may ukay-ukay, Mr. Chair, not a single penny being paid. Not a single penny. Kumikita lang dito yung operator. And alam ng BIR, alam ng customs, andyan, nagkalat. Gala-gala kayo kahit sa lugar. Oo nga, kasi abot ka ng mga mahirap. Pero isipin din natin na namamatay din yung ating garment industry because they cannot compete. Itong mga ukay-ukay, napakamura. So itong mga local manufacturer ng RTWs, they can no longer compete. Some of them shut down even years ago. Ilan na kaya yung mga RTW factory locally na nag-shut down dahil nga hindi kaya mag-compete sa ukay-ukay? Alam natin na meron dyan na illegal at hindi nagbabayad ng tax, and yet we allow them to proliferate. And we're not doing anything. There's a law. PD 2033, 1986, RA 4653, 1966. Merong pagkakakulong ito, 2.5 years eh. 2.5 years to 2 years, fine of 20,000 pesos. This was back in 1966 pa. Dapat ngayon, milyon at makulong pa ng ilang taon. Yun lang, Mr. Chair, we have to watch out those LOAs. And then, last na lamang, itong sa Caloocan, i-revisit natin yung pagbigay ng lisensya sa kanya. Mr. Chair, free na siya sa pag-import ng raw materials. And then pagdating sa pag-export niya, binibigyan siya ng tax break sa corporate income tax niya. So, lilitaw, zero. Ano pang kinita ng gobyerno natin dito? Adding insult to injury, binibigyan din siya ng break as far as pagsisweldo sa mga manggagawa. Libre pumasok yung kanyang mga kargamento. At kapag inilabas yan, libre din siya sa tax. Anong kagaguhan itong nangyari sa ating bayan? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Fo. I do agree that we all know this, and any honest taxpayer will probably know this, that the LOA is being weaponized by some unscrupulous individuals. And let's call a spade, no? And that's why I support the suggestion of Senator Raffy Tulfo to come up with an analysis on these LOAs being submitted in line with the oversight powers of the Senate, and that's why we're requesting and directing the BIR to submit to us all the LOAs in the last 5 years and last 3 years, and we're directing the STSRO to analyze and come up with recommendations to that effect. In the same manner, I also heard the good senator mentioned also ghost exportation and ghost and paper exportation. This should not happen because anything that goes out of the PEZA should pay customs duties as well as VAT. But obviously something is happening, no?
Mr. Chair, correction. Free po yung importation, pero pag in-export na yan, wala pa rin silang babayad. However, dun sa income tax nung exporter. Kaso nga, wala namang lumalabas. And then, hindi na monitor ng BIR kung magkano yung na-export kung meron talaga. So, kung sasabihin ng exporter ng locator, ang na-export ko lang piso, doon siya magbabayad sa halagang piso. Pero wag ka, ang in-export niya 100 million. Nilolokong BIR. Yung BIR, kunyari, nagtatanga-tangahan sa magkanong kadahilanan. Yun. And then another thing pa, BIR, you guys are listening, customs banded warehouse. Kaya nga dapat may mga taga-customs dito, Mr. Chair. Isa pa yan na inaabuso. Same concept. Libre ang mapapasok ng mga raw materials and then finished product, i-export, magbabayad ng tax yung may-ari ng custom banded warehouse. Ang tanong ko po sa inyo sa BIR, ilan ba ang nasa listahan nyo ng mga customs banded warehouse? We should have that.
Sorry, Your Honor, we don't have the information, but we can have it also.
Pero aware ka na there's such thing as customs
Yes,
banded
sir. Yes,
warehouse.
sir.
At in your experience, nakakarinig ka na mga taga-customs banded warehouse na issue ng LOA.
I think so, Your Honor. Yes.
Then when you come back next time, then show me those LOAs. And I'm very interested to know what happened to those LOAs.
Yes, Your Honor.
Paano sila hinandle?
Yes,
Paano
actually,
kumita ang
yes,
gobyerno doon sa LOAs that was issued to these customs banded warehouse? Dalawa yan, Mr. Chair. Meron tayong sa PEZA at meron tayong customs banded warehouse. Yung special economic zone, sa loob ng special economic zone, nagtatayo sila ng locator. Itong customs banded warehouse, kahit na dyan sa gilid-gilid, pwede sila magtayo. Andito pala, Mr. Chair, si Mr. Ralph De Parin.
Good morning,
Is Mr. De Parin?
good morning, Senator Tulfo and Senator Gatchalian.
Ikaw pala, diyan ka lang, tahimik ka lang pala kanina. Hindi ka ba tumaas ng kamay?
I would
Pwede ba
like-
natin siya ipa-under oath, Mr. Chair?
If the senator requests, will request the committee to conduct an oath to the representative of BOC, may I direct the Secretariat to conduct his oath to the representative of the BOC.
Tayo po tayo. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this public hearing?
Okay, please acknowledge to the mic.
Yes, I do.
Right, go ahead, sir.
Sir Ralph, ilan po, more or less, ang nasa listahan ng Bureau of Customs na mga customs banded warehouse?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Senator, actually, I am not, I don't have the information right now, but I can ask the proper office po.
Okay. Para
I apologize
maniwalagan
po.
tayong lahat, kasi kanina pa ako nagbabagit na customs banded warehouse, yung special economic zone, import, and then export, etc. Mas maganda manggagaling sa'yo. Paano natitreat? How do you treat yung customs banded warehouse? Yung proseso, pagpasok ng raw materials, titingin ka pa sa libro. Ako, alam ko na, hindi na ako titingin sa libro mo.
Mr. Senator, I'm actually, I have to be frank po, bagong hire lang din po ako so I'm still learning pa po actually.
Pag dumating po yung container nitong sa customs banded warehouse, nilalodge po yan sa EM2. E2M. Matapos may lodge yan sa E2M na sinasabi ko anong raw materials at saan pupunta. Dapat yan, guarded yan, sasamahan ng customs police papunta doon sa bodega. Pero kadalasan, hindi na sinasamahan. Bahala ka na dyan. Napag-usapan na. At dapat pagdating doon sa bodega, ipiprepare na yan for processing. Kaso doon sa bodega, wala namang processing plant, wala namang equipment to process that raw materials. Tama? Dapat periodically, kayo dyan sa Bureau of Customs, nag-inspect lahat ng mga may customs banded warehouse. Kasi yung iba, Mr. Chair, para mabigyan silang permit, mag-rent sila talaga ng bodega. At nandyan yung processing plant. Renta lang. After na ma-inspection, aprubahan, after 2 months, ililet go na yung parang show factory lang. Dapat, yun. Mano-mano, dapat computerized na. The moment nag-file ng entry, up to nagdating sa bodega na dapat may CCTV, and then up to after na yun po ay na-process, hanggang sa yun po ay i-re-export, tinatawagan niyo po yung BIR to let the BIR know na yung mga produktong pinasok ng libre sa tax, eto na, pwede nyo nang kalkulahin yung buwis. Nag-guess nyo po? Kaya nga technical. Tsaka bago ka lang siguro, kahapon ka lang pumasok.
Few months pa lang po
Few
actually.
months. Kasi bumukas ka ng libro eh. Sige. Wala na. There's no point.
I
Sorry,
apologize po,
I
Mr.
don't blame him.
Senator.
There's no point talking to this gentleman. Pinadala dito yung talagang walang alam para ligawin tayo. Di ba? I don't blame you, sir. I don't blame you. I'm not gonna talk to you anymore kasi ayokong lalo ka madiin dito. Sorry. It's okay, sir.
Pasensya na po, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Senator.
Yes,
po.
sir. Okay po, sir.
But I will take note po kung ano po yung mga, ano ko po.
Kung sino
yung mga
nagpadala
pwede
dito sa-
niyong, hingiin na data po. I can of course it to the proper office po.
Sir,
sa
sino nagpadala sa iyo dito?
Legal service po, Senator.
Pagalitan mo.
Duly noted po.
Dapat siya dito nang nanginginig, hindi ikaw. Ikaw yung bago, ikaw ang pinaka-bago, ikaw yung pinadala rito.
Yes po. Duly noted po, Mr. Senator.
Okay, sige po. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tufo. Again, I'm also quite interested in this ghost exportation / paper exportation allegation. So we would like to, again, the committee is directing all the IPAs here present, CDC, PEZA, who are the other IPAs? Subic, I guess, no? The committee will send letters to all the IPAs to give us your position paper on this ghost exportation and paper exportation. This is happening within your jurisdictions, and would like to inquire if there is such phenomenon happening in your own jurisdictions. Senator Fo has requested to look at this issue, and the committee deems it necessary to drill down and to look at this issue. We'll not go into the details now, but please prepare your documents and your position paper to that effect. At the same time, we're also directing the customs to give us a list of the customs bonded warehouses operating in the country. There's also allegations that these customs bonded warehouses are being used as a way to smuggle in products, meaning they go into the bonded warehouse, they go out without paying any taxes. So we'd like to also inquire from the customs all the operating CBWs in the country, paying special focus to the one that was mentioned by Senator Tulfo in Caloocan. No? Just take note of that CBW. With that, so those are the three requests from Senator Tulfo, and the committee is directed to take note of that, and we will tackle that, those items in the next hearing.
Mr. Chair, last na lamang po, ito, example tong sa OPCM. Okay, na pinuntahan ng BIR. Itong OPCM is One Subic Premier Manufacturing Corporation and Hong Sim International Corporation. OPCM, One Subic Premier Manufacturing Corporation, and HIC, Hong Sim International Corporation. Okay. Now, nung puntahan po ito ng BIR, they admitted na hindi sila nagmamanufacture ng cigarette. Kasi ang deal, magpapasok sila ng raw materials to produce cigarettes, and then those cigarettes, pag na-produce na, i-re-export. Nung puntahan ng BIR, wala silang nakitang machine, wala silang nakitang mga sigarilyo na for export, kundi mga papel and printer na nagpiprint ng mga pangalan ng kung ano ng sigarilyo. At yun ay kanilang i-re-export. Yun ay mga papel na lang. Karton, boxes, na sinasabing kunyari, ABC cigarette. Tapos karton yan. Pag binuksan mo karton, puro wrapper. Wala talagang sigarilyo. Yun sinasabi ko, sample of paper export. Basura ang in-export. Nakita ng BIR to. Kaya nga, sa next hearing, gusto kong malaman anong nangyari doon sa ginawa ng BIR na pagpunta dito sa OPCM. Same thing with the Victoria Wave Special Economic Zone sa may Caloocan na nakitaan din sa Tala City, Caloocan City, na nakitaan din ng BIR ng mga violations. Anong nangyari doon sa ginawang pagpunta ng BIR na may nakita sila mga violations? How did they handle those violations? How was it handled? Anong naging resulta? Kumita bang gobyerno? O lalo na mayagpag itong dalawang kumpanya? Tuloy-tuloy yung violations. Yun lang po, Mr. Chair. Thank you po.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, we direct the committee secretary to send all the IPAs a letter requesting for a position paper on the ghost exports and the paper exports. And please instruct them to also prepare for a hearing later on. Okay? Thank you, Senator Rafi, and let me put on record my support to all the requests of Senator Rafi Tulfo. These are realities on the ground, and it's also part of the jurisdiction of the Committee on Ways and Means to look at all of these anomalies happening in our country. So with that, we'll go into the resolutions that are in the agenda today, and all the resolutions actually talk about the same thing, no? Inconsistency between the create law and the implementing rules and regulations, thereby disadvantaging the domestic corporations who are in this, who are doing exports as well. And let me just flash on the screen the crux of the issue today, and we'll tackle this today, and we'll request the DOF to give us their opinion and updates to this inconsistency. So let me just flash on the screen just to do some recap. No? All right, so I think everyone's all familiar with this. In the CREATE law, in one of its provisions, Section 295, letter D of the NIRC, and let me just read. The VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local purchases shall only apply to goods and services directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity by a registered business enterprise. And however, in the subsequent IRR dated June 21, 2021, and let me just, in section 5, let me just read. Value-added tax, zero rating and exemption, exemption on importation, and VAT zero rating on local purchases apply to goods and services directly and exclusively used in the project and activity of export enterprises. And the amended IRR also reflected the same, no? That zero rating and VAT exemption are only can only be applied to registered export enterprise. So, and this led to a lot of confusion, and a lot of our domestic enterprises were disadvantaged. And we'd like to get some comments from the DOF and the DTI who issued the IRR, and just give us an update on this and what are the remedies that we can implement so that we can correct this inconsistency. Obviously, there's inconsistency, no? And we'd like to hear the opinion of the DOF, how this happened, and how do we move forward with this. Asek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. We are yet to provide the committee assigned position paper. However, if I may be allowed to cite some of the comments that we have, the signed position paper that we submitted to the House of Representatives on the similar resolutions. Regarding the inconsistency of the IRR of the CREATE Act, we believe that actually it's consistent with the objectives of the law to create a more equitable tax incentives regime. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, that is performance-based, targeted, time-bound, and transparent. The CREATE Act, and this is quite an important point, merely harmonize the CREATE Act and the train law provisions. So some of the issues that might have that you mentioned, Mr. Chair, is actually in the train law provision. So the previous administration and the DOF initiated the CTRP during the past to reduce the poverty and address the inequality through a fairer, simpler, and more efficient tax system. Section 31 of the train law amended Section 106A2A of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997. So the train law no longer considered export sales the sale of raw materials or packaging materials to an export-oriented enterprise whose export sales exceed 70%, and those considered export sales under EO 226, or otherwise known as the Omnibus Investment Code of 1987. And these are, again, the train law remove the 0% or the zero-rated VAT of these transactions on the condition of a successful establishment and implementation of an enhanced VAT refund system that grants refunds of creditable input tax within 90 days from the filing of the VAT refund. It must also be highlighted that in promulgating the train law, then President Duterte vetoed Sections 31 and 33 of the enrolled bill. Section 31 refers to the sale and delivery of goods to registered enterprises within a separate customs territory as provided under special laws. And these are the special economic zones that we have right now. And second, registered enterprises within TIESA, the tourism enterprises zone within TIESA. And also Section 33, the services rendered to registered enterprises within a separate customs territory, and the registered enterprises within TIESA. So then President Duterte reasoned that the said provisions go against the principle of limiting the VAT zero rating to direct exporters, hence the veto. The next point is that the evolution of tax laws on the treatment of VAT inside economic and free port zones have been amended and has thus limited the application of the cross-border doctrine. And now we go to the issue of the CBD or the cross-border doctrine. Ecozones and free port zones are still considered separate customs territory to ensure the free flow or movement of goods. However, the cross-border doctrine has been rendered ineffectual through the passage of the Train Law and the CREATE Act. Number one, because of the veto of sections 31 and 33, again, that pertains to the separate customs territory. And second, sections 294E and 295D of the tax code limits the VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local purchases of goods and services directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity by a registered business enterprise. So it's the law itself which limited the flow of goods and services inside an economic zone. The third point is that the intent of Congress, and this is where we said that the IRRs actually aligned with the intent of Congress to make sure that the tax incentive regime is performance-based, targeted, time-bound, and transparent. The restriction on the VAT incentives to registered export enterprises under Rule 2, Section 5 of the CREATE Act IRR, as mentioned by the Chair, merely captures the policies of the Train Law and the CREATE Act in formulating an equitable tax incentives regime. As is stated in Section 294 of the Tax Code, VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating may be granted. So it's not mandatory incentive. And in the House of Representatives, actually, they don't treat it as an incentive. As the incentive is not a mandatory provision, the IRR qualified the grant of VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity and prescribe a maximum period of 17 years from the date of registration, again in keeping with the time-bound principle of the CREATE Act. The continuous adoption of the the cross-border doctrine is inconsistent with the objectives of the CREATE Act to develop a more equitable tax incentive regime. As can be gleaned from the phrase directly and exclusively used, again, as found in the CREATE Law. The next item, perhaps this is more on the update. We do recognize the issues that is related to the implementation of the law. The previous issuances by the BIR on VAT have been rendered ineffective by the Train Law as supplemented by the CREATE Law. And let me just go to the updates. So we have undertaken some steps and measures to resolve the VAT concerns of various sectors, most notably the following. The amendment to Rule 18, Section 5 of the IRR of the CREATE Act, which allows registered export enterprises whose income tax-based incentives have expired to continue enjoying the VAT zero rating on local purchases until the electronic sales reporting system of the BIR is fully operational. And second, allowing the registered business enterprises classified as domestic market enterprises located inside the zone during the transitory period to register as a VAT taxpayer. And what is the implication? The allowing them to register as VAT taxpayer also gives them the relief because it allows them to pass on the VAT and not be a burden to them as a cost. The next one is the issuance of BIR RMC numbers 24-2023 and 53-2023, which classified Ecozone Logistics Service Enterprises and Ecozone Developers and Operators as export enterprises to accord them the VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local purchases. And again, this is in response to some of the requests also in the letters that we received from the Ecozone developers themselves. The next one is the issuance of BIR RR 3-2023 to provide a negative list of expenses that are not considered as directly and exclusively used. So essentially, because the issue is that it limits what the locators can or what the exporters can refund, can consider as refundable for VAT purposes. Therefore, a negative list has been listed down. So they are not precluded. So we have the 6 negative lists that are not considered as direct and exclusive. But the export enterprises are also not precluded from further proving that that any local purchase of goods and services relating to their services can be refunded for VAT purposes. The issuance of BIR RMC 71-2023 and RMO 23-2023, dated June 23, 2023, streamlined the documentary requirements and procedures for filing and processing the VAT refund. And such modifications in the system include the reduction of documentary requirements from 30 to a minimum of 9 and a maximum of 17 documents. The non-submission of scanned copies of sales invoices, so they don't need to submit the scanned copies anymore, and the reduction in the number of offices to process the VAT refund claims. Just to also to inform the body regarding the grant of VAT zero rating also to domestic enterprises, even those inside the zone. There is a revenue implication on the part of the government if that will be adopted. Okay. So if the domestic enterprises are given the VAT incentive or the VAT zero rating, the estimated total revenue impact is close to 1.3 billion for year 1 or 24.4 billion for 10 years. And the estimate is based on the zero-rated purchases of domestic enterprises located inside the economic zones or free port zones. Apart from the revenue application, there's also the equity. The grant of VAT incentives to registered domestic enterprises creates an uneven playing field or unfair competition in favor of those registered businesses providing the same goods and services which are not registered in any IPA, especially in the manner of costing and pricing of such goods and services. Finally, for information and for transparency, Mr. Chair, we would just like to inform the committee that the issues that the aforementioned Senate resolutions seek to address are related, if not similar, to the issues pending with the Supreme Court involving a petition for review filed by the Subic Bay Freeport Chamber of Commerce. The petition seeks to question the validity of the CREATE Act IRR and the relevant PIR and issuances. In addition, a petition for certiorari and prohibition involving the same issues, more specifically on the validity of the exclusion of DMEs, has also been filed before the Court of Tax Appeals by Sureste Properties, Inc. in February 2023. Finally, the House of Representatives has already passed the Create More Bill version in the committee just last week, Mr. Chair. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I comment on your position statement, let me go around and ask the opinion of the different stakeholders who are here. It's important to listen to our stakeholders because they are the frontliners and the businesses operating on the ground. And would like to hear their thoughts on this as to what are the implications of this IRR to the operations of our locators as well as IPAs in the country. So we'll request their comments on that, and they can also segue into their issues and challenges as to the implementation of CREATE so that we can save time. No? So we'll start off with Attorney De Venadera, who's the chairman and president of the CDC, for their thoughts on the IRR of CREATE as well as other issues pertaining to the implementation of CREATE.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Actually, in our submission, we also included a PowerPoint, and we would want to simplify the position. First and foremost, the IRR is supposed to be the IRR for the CREATE law, and it can never be justified to include any other law, much less the train law. Dapat merong kanyang IRR yon. So that's the first thing. Second, our locators and investors are confronted with two major difficulties. One is the ease in doing business, and one is the consistency in policy. This particular subject matter boils down to the inconsistency in the policies. So we just focus on the next. We just focus on whether Rule 18, Section 5 of the Implementing Rules and Regulations of RA 11534 or the CREATE Act is consistent with the intention of providing all registered business enterprises a transitory period of 10 years. Now, and we will show, next, we will show that on the left side is the provision of the CREATE law, and on the right side is the provision of the IRR that is supposed to implement the particular provision of the law. So Section 311, which is investments prior to the effectivity of the CREATE law. So we will see that what is stated here refers merely to the registered business enterprises. And also the CREATE IRR says and maintains that and mentions registered business enterprises currently availing of the 5% on gross income, or GIE, as more commonly known. And therefore, because we only refer to the RBEs, or registered business enterprises, then we can really infer that the intent is to apply the transitory provisions to all RBEs with no classification. Next, please. Now, on the Rule 18 of the CREATE IRR, Section 5, we're showing that under the CREATE Act, there is no such provision upon which Rule 18, Section 5 can be anchored. And we cannot have an IRR which is not supported by a provision of the law. Section 5 does not specifically correspond to any provision of the CREATE Act. So, and we have been repeating that. And because it does not correspond to any provision of CREATE Act, it should not be in the IRR. As simple as that. Next slide, please. Okay, applicability of the VAT exemption. Now, on the left side, we have the Section 294 on incentives. And it is still very, very clear that this shall apply to registered business enterprise. Now, in the IRR, in the attempt to implement this particular provision, there all of a sudden has a distinction. It's no longer registered business enterprise. It's now being mentioned that it is applicable to registered export enterprise. This has no basis, Your Honor, and that's our position. And on the next, Section 294 of the CREATE Act, again, refers to registered business enterprise. Now, the BIR revenue regulation, it's not an IRR, not part of the IRR, but it's an issuance by an agency of the DOF. Now, it now also makes distinction between not just the registered business enterprise, now it makes a distinction between a registered export enterprise and a registered domestic enterprise. Again, it has no basis under the law. And our position is that the IRR of the BIR, which is Rule 18, Section 5, the IRR of the CREATE Act, this particular provision must be recalled by DOF. And for the BIR Revenue Regulation 21-2021, again, because it's not supported by the provision of the CREATE Act, it must likewise be recalled. That's the position. Now, on another point, which is the cross-border doctrine, under the CREATE Act, there is already a definition, and it is a reiteration of a doctrine that the free port zones refer to an isolated and policed area adjacent to a port of entry which shall be operated and managed as a separate customs territory. In the BIR Revenue Memorandum Circular Number 24-2022, our first question is, prior to the CREATE law, what rule governs the sale of goods and services by a VAT-registered seller from the customs territory to enterprises located and registered within the economic zone or a free port? Of course, we said the position of CDC is that before the CREATE Act, ecozones and free port zones were by legal fiction regarded as foreign territories. And the sale of goods and services by a VAT-registered seller to registered enterprises in this economic and free port zones were treated as constructive exports subject to 0% VAT. Now, on the next question is, was this cross-border doctrine still remains to be applicable with the passage of the CREATE Act? Of course, our position, the position of CDC, is that the cross-border doctrine as applied to ecozones or free port zones has been rendered ineffectual and inoperative with these particular provisions. So the final query is it the intention of the law to make the cross-border doctrine in ecozone or free port zones inoperative or ineffectual for VAT purposes? Mr. Chairman, this is giving so much upheaval among our locators. And as emphasized by the framers of the CREATE law, this is not a revenue measure, but a performance incentive measure. And the net effect of the interpretation of the VAT is that since the local purchases now are subjected to VAT, our local producers are disadvantaged. Our locators would rather import and avail of the zero VAT rather than buy from our local producers. And that is particularly true in the Clark development, in the Clark Freeport zone, where we have many of our producers in the province of Pampanga. And before, when we did not have this kind of interpretation on our VAT, the economic activities in the region has gone up. In fact, Mr. Chairman, the poverty rate in Pampanga is 2.9%, as against the national poverty rate of 18%. So the unemployment is also quite low, and unemployment is more or less concentrated on the newly graduates. We have 1,161 locators, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, pwede rin President. And we have 137,000 workers, regular workers in the zone. Some of our locators have already deferred their expansion because when we do the costing, the VAT, the imposed on local purchases, will really be a game changer in their business models. So they would rather import. So the revenues that we're trying to generate, we're losing them in, I think, in a worse manner. because the local purchases are now being now they have the are being given up in favor of importations. Some of our locators, Mr. President, have gone down to 4-day work week because they are now managing their financial models. Some have already deferred their expansion precisely because now they cannot make their business models conform with the original. Mr. President, we have other competitors outside of the borders of the Philippines, and some of our locators are saying they are now looking into Vietnam to have their expansion, if not totally transfer. And we are very worried because because of the 1,161 locators that we already have now. And the more and more of the locators or future locators that President Marcos has invited in all his trips. So this is not something that is small time. This can be a game changer in maintaining our investors and in bringing more investors to our Freeport zones. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman De Vanadera. In your presentation, there's also, I was looking a copy of your presentation. There's also an OGCC opinion. May I request an explanation of this? I think this is a very important um, document that we need to put into the records.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Actually, before we went to before we filed anything, we went first to OGCC to get an opinion. And in the opinion of the OGCC, which is the statutory council of all GOCCs, it is stated that the IRR, particular IRR provisions that is in question is actually outside the ambit. And if I may just quote the very particular term that was used by OGCC in its opinion, in sum, we reiterate our position that first, the subject agencies exceeded the scope of their respective rulemaking powers in promulgating Section 5, Rule 18, and Section 2, Rule 5 of the CREATE Act IRR, as well as certain provisions in subject BIR issuances as this deviated from the tenor and intent of the CREATE Act, thereby effectively limiting the employment of VAT zero rating for local purchases to goods and services directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity only of REEs to the exclusion of DMEs. REEs meaning registered export enterprises, DMEs meaning domestic enterprises. Second, the business enterprises adversely affected by the promulgation of the CREATE Act IRR and the subject BIR issuances may invoke the expanded certiorari power of jurisdiction of the court to nullify the ultra vires acts of the subject agencies in issuing certain provisions of the CREATE Act IRR and the subject BIR issuances. However, for the information of this committee, Your Honor, we did not pursue this particular path of filing a petition. Instead, we went to Congress. We wrote the senators and the congressmen requesting that this be looked into in the exercise of the plenary power of both houses. So those are the very categorical statements of the opinion of OGCC. And we think it has very great bearing considering that OGCC is the statutory council of the GOCCs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairperson De Vanadera. I have a lot of questions, but I want to focus on just one, no? Because this is quite concerning. That because of this inconsistent IRR, the locators are choosing to import, no? Because obviously they don't pay VAT and duties on it, rather than purchase from local suppliers. No? And the intention of the bill, and also intention of many, is to create a supply chain. No? And that's a weakness that we're trying to address in many fronts. I know Dan knows about this, no? In semiconductor, in automobiles, in shipbuilding. A lot of the negative comments that I hear from potential investors, we don't have a robust supply chain. No? And because of this IRR, is now also creating a negative effect in that quest to improve our supply chain. Can you cite some examples, Madam Chairperson, on some companies that are who opted to import, no? And instead of buying locally? And do you have any data as to, let's say, if they buy locally, this is the price. If they import, this is the price, and how it affects the end product, no? Because we want to also simulate how this IRR is creating much more expensive products. In short, the products are more expensive, and making us less competitive. No? And if we are less competitive, then the business is also not being competitive, and probably they're losing money, you know, because of a high cost. So, do you have any simulation to that effect, or any examples that you can cite today, so that everyone will appreciate the real effects of this provision? No? The provision is just words, but there are also tangible effects to the products. No?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will cite an example of Roy's Hotel. Roy's Hotel is the latest in the big hotels in Clark. But because the investors are Filipinos, they ordered furniture, all of their furniture, from Pampanga furniture makers. And then came this, and they slowed down in the completion also of ordering the furniture because, well, if you import from China, you get it at less cost. But I don't have exact figures. But because the owners of Roy's Hotel are Filipinos, they did not decide to import, but they slowed down. Now, the other one is we have very big expansion of Hilton. They are adding 600 rooms plus another building will be put up, I think another 400 rooms. Now, they are in the construction stage now. But of course, they're now looking into bringing in or furnishing their hotels. And the suggestion, of course, of Clark Development Corporation is to give our local producers a chance to be able to furnish their hotels. But they're coming up with numbers. And malaki po yung magiging difference. In terms of just to be able, maybe this committee will appreciate the kind of local support that CDC is giving to the local producers. We're coming up, and it's now being in their final stages of doing the interiors. We are having the showroom for our furniture done in Region 3. And this is supposed to push our local products into the mainstream of the supply chain within the Freeport zone, considering that we have over 1,000 exporters, I mean locators. So I don't have the exact numbers, but we can do some pencil footing only on these two particular locators, Your Honor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. We'll request from the CDC some simulation, maybe a few businesses, 3, 4, 5 businesses, on how this provision affected their cost, affected their business model, and affected their overall investment outlook. You also mentioned earlier that some of them are either not expanding or reducing their size or maybe expanding outside. So maybe get some hard numbers, no, on how this provision affected their operations and their cost. So with that, I'll defer my questions because I have a few more, but we want to hear also our other source persons. We want to hear from PEZA, Mr. Panga, on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the position of the chairman that there are noted inconsistencies between the create law and its IRR, and the same IRR that was made as basis for the BIR RMC. So put together, the IRR and the RMCs are both flawed. And we have submitted the same position to Congress. I think no less than the chairman of the lower house, Ways and Means, already made a categorical position on the noted deficiencies. And so we shared the same position with CDC, with the rest of the industries. And while CDC made mention of the OGCC opinion, we also have a copy of the OSG opinion, sustaining the same arguments, particularly on the coverage of incentives, whether it should apply only to export, because on the wordings of the law it says RBEs, and then the other one on the applicability of the cross-border doctrine. Despite the amendments introduced in the IRR, OSG is of the opinion that the cross-border doctrine, by virtue of the separate customs territory vested in the ecozones, was never repealed in the CREATE law. And to us in PESA, this has been the selling point to our locators when they locate in an economic zone, because that's in keeping with the best practice of all free ports worldwide. Anything that you bring inside, it undergoes process, and for most part, our locators are export-oriented. So, but there are other issues that we'd like to bring up with the committee. Number one is we have yet to receive a categorical position from Congress or even the DOJ that the CREATE law, its application must be prospective in nature, because this will protect already those pre-CREATE enterprises pursuant to that sunset provision of the law, that they must enjoy full protection of the law because of that sunset. And what's happening now, Your Honor, is that because of the BIR RMCs, which were made to appear that these are even retroactive in application, even some host LGUs already took advantage by imposing fees and taxes on pre-create. This should be undisturbed for the duration of the sunset period. The other issue also is on the putting a term limit on the tax and duty-free importation, the same being non-income tax based. And so we're saying that the moment you remove this, this will definitely erode the competitiveness of the economic zones, because with that, then you bring in already items where you will be subject to payment of taxes and duties. And I don't see our export industries being viable the moment you receive this. And I think the other more compelling is on the short period for the sunset, even for the 17 years incentivized period, we look at a scenario where after locators will graduate to the regular income tax rate, and you look at the RCEP across ASEAN, we're the only economy offering 25% CIT rate together with Myanmar. And so with that, that will definitely signal exodus of especially of our foreign direct investors. We might not be viable anymore in hosting export-oriented industries in view of this competition across ASEAN. And so our request is for the committee to look into this. On the DMEs, Your Honor, In PESA, we never registered DME, so we never granted zero VAT on any DME. But moving forward, if that is the contemplation of the law, under the CRATE, we can now register domestic market-oriented enterprises. That's all. By the way, Your Honor, just a quick rejoinder. The three companies earlier mentioned by Senator Tulfo are not PESA registered. So we will submit our report in the next hearing. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We also invited the American Chamber of Commerce, AmCham. Any comments on the IRR as well as other issues that your members are encountering in the implementation of CREATE?
Morning, Mr. Chair. I'm also representing, by the way, the BPO sector, given that a large part of our sector are also American companies. So if the chair permits, I would like to speak as well on behalf of the BPO sector, since, as you know, we are largely affected by all these issuances, and we therefore appreciate the effort of the committee to actually call this hearing and to allow us to make manifestations with respect to the issues that have hounded us. I'll begin, Mr. Chair, considering that we have spoken about the VAT issue, but if later on permitted, I can also touch upon other issues that have arisen precisely because of the CREATE amendments. On the VAT issue, ever since the issuance, the very first issuance that truly impacted us was Revenue Regulations 9-2021, and this was passed in September, if I believe, in the year 2021. And in fact, together with the Semiconductors Association, we held a press conference, and we did make manifestation that this was going to be catastrophic to the entire export industry. And I think that was where it was initially brought up, that the impact was that there was going to be a wholesale migration of pretty much all the exporters to just procuring goods, for the most part goods from importations rather than local purchases. No? And as a consequence, the BIR's reaction to the same was that it deferred the implementation of that regulation, and it came up with Revenue Regulations 15-2021. But that being said, we knew that for a fact what was going to come back and haunt us was really the issue, the phrase that has been coming back and forth, which is the direct and exclusive. And I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the things that have already been mentioned, and for the most part, I think DG Theo Panga talked about the retention of the separate customs territory concept precisely because of the non-repeal of the same, despite the fact that there were a number of specific provisions that were repealed by CREATE when it was passed, and the fact that that specific provision in PESA law only gives a very clear signal that indeed the separate customs territory of PESA has to be retained. That notwithstanding, we knew that we were going to again get hit with the possible interpretation of directly and exclusively. But that being said, and I guess maybe deferring to the good faith of the administrative agencies that are tasked to, in fact, implement the same, we waited for the issuances that did come out. But the very first impact, and you probably are aware of this, Mr. Chair, was on the front of healthcare provision for the many employees that we have within our industry, which now numbers to around 1.7 million direct employees. And the interpretation initially given was by the BIR was that this is not covered. And of course, we as an association had to write the BIR, the DOF, and the DTI, the two later agencies being the component parts of what is known as the FIRB. And among the many things that we made mention, including the retention of the separate customs territory, was the fact that there is perhaps a lack of understanding of our industry. Because the analogy that we gave, Mr. Chair, is that while insurance, for instance, of equipment of those engaged in manufacturing was considered to be direct and exclusive, the HMO that we provide, the HMO coverage that we provide to our employees was not. And despite our full effort to try and veer away from analogizing that equipment is equivalent to the human resources that we implement in our industry, truth be told, we felt that that was really the way to go, which is to make everybody realize that this was how we treated the head count that we rely on to be able to deliver the services and generate the revenue in our industry. So there were a lot of, and I distinctly recall that several days before Christmas last year, Mr. Chair, there were a lot of very prominent HMOs that were already threatening to stop provision of healthcare services among our employees, no? Which I suppose resulted to the dialogues that were had, and which resulted to what ASIC Juvie talked about, which is the passage of Revenue Regulations 3-2021. I guess the reservation that the industry still has with the issuance, which is now known as the negative list issuance, Mr. Chair, is the fact that one is that from the beginning we have consistently taken the position that the interpretation of direct and exclusive must reside with the IPAs. And the two issues that we have with the current practice of having the BIR make the interpretation via the passage of implementing rules and regulations are number one. Obviously, there's an inherent conflict of interest, because while on the one hand they are by mandate supposedly required to generate revenue, which I think ASEC Juvie also made mention is going to impact the revenue that the BIR will be able to deliver. I think more importantly, the proposition is that the IPAs need to be able to have that position precisely because they are the ones that interface with us from the cradle to the grave. They register us, they regulate us, and if in case we want to exit from the zone, they are the ones that need to seek to provide clearance to us. And I think also logic dictates that if you are asking if a certain expense is related to the operations of a certain enterprise, it would actually be the IPAs that would have the capacity and the competency to be able to make that determination. So as we speak, Mr. Chair, as you can glean from the issuances that are still currently existing, that power completely resides with the BIR. And despite the fact that, again, there was an attempt to supposedly, cure this issue, Mr. Chair, we understand from many of our members that some HMOs still go to the BIR, still get response that indeed, while not the entire headcount of all your companies would have to pay the VAT, there is that requirement to ensure that it is only with respect to those that are in operations. Within our industry, Mr. Chair, it is very difficult to confine and bifurcate operations from the non-operation segment. Because, for instance, in a company such as ours, which is numbering more than 100,000 indirect employees, as you can imagine, our HR, for instance, department is composed of more than 1,000 people. Because definitely this is something that needs to be carried out as a function. So I think, Mr. Chair, I'd like to, one last point about the VAT is that we'd like to echo what DG Teo Panga from PESA made mention. The ultimate issue that we have here, while one among many issues is the VAT, is our lack of competitiveness, if we insist on this, no? One thing that you will hear very often is that we change the rules in the middle of the game, and all these incremental costs will just build up, and our ability to be able to price our services better compared and vis-a-vis our, for instance, our direct competitor, our most prominent competitors such as India, is eroded precisely because of these unnecessary costs. And if the thought is that we will anyway be able to recover it via a claim for refund, then there are technical stumbling blocks and hurdles that we need to account for. Among others is our ability to actually go down the path of registering so that we can refund. And secondly, Senator Raffy Tulfo spoke about some practices where if your intention is to file a claim for refund, at the end of the day, you might even end up with a negative because you will be assessed more than being given a claim for refund. And therefore, this is really not something that we could take as an alternative. Which is why, Mr. Chair, when we, and if I may, when we were appearing in the lower house in the hearings for Create More, we made it very clear that our intention is really to support a position that would remove any authority and or jurisdiction over the BIR to be, if any interpretation needs to be made, obviously the more preferred route is that there is a reversion to how it was pre-create. Anyway, and as a last point, Mr. Chair, one thing that is not removed is the power of the BIR to conduct post-audit. So therefore, if there is any disbelief, and alluding to the point that was made by Senator Raffy Tulfo, that there are some scrupulous, unscrupulous enterprises that are taking this, taking advantage of all these tax benefits, the BIR is not left without any power because they can always issue assessments, and there is always the judiciary in the form of the Court of Tax Appeals to resolve any matter along those lines. And for companies such as ours, which definitely do not have any ill intent and only would want to generate revenues and employment for the Philippines, we are always ready, willing, and able to confront any issue. But if we allow for all this confusion to proliferate just because we are arming an agency to make that interpretation, again in conflict with its avowed mandate, then it will permit the situation where we now find ourselves in. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. And in the same manner, no, I would like to ask some simulation. Like for example, I also heard lack of competitiveness, especially in the BPO sector. I know that we're not alone in the world. No? India is a fierce competitor when it comes to the BPO sector, and how this policy, especially on the IRR, affected the competitiveness of our BPO sector. The BPO sector is one sector that we personally I am very optimistic with. It's an inspiration in terms of job creation, in terms of foreign direct investments, foreign currency inflows. So it's an industry that we need to make sure that it's competitive, no? Not protect, but competitive, you know, in order so that you guys can constantly get new customers and also move up the value chain. Now, just a basic question: how did it affect the competitiveness of our BPO sector? Meron ba, do you have any simulation that we can see? Because what I want to put on record is not only the mere legalese, no, the legal aspect of the inconsistency, but also how it affected industries, and reflect the peso value of that negative effect. No? Do we have that type of simulation?
Yeah, so we both have the macro and the micro. The industry association can most definitely submit studies to that effect, Mr. Chair. And maybe I alluded to the fact that if we were to take a look at it from a country versus country perspective, it's the Philippines versus India. But if I were allowed to maybe just illustrate from my company's perspective, Mr. Chair, so we're located in more than 50 countries in the world. And when we are engaged, for instance, by our clients, we have the ability and the autonomy to actually determine where to locate the services to be provided. So therefore, in the situations where we have that ability, we have a cost per head, for instance, to be able to make that delivery. When costs are increased precisely because of these situations, Senator, and sometimes it's not just a matter of imputing the incremental, for instance, because the VAT is 12%, it's not solely the 12%. Because as you can imagine, if we're unable to provide healthcare, that would just simply mean that attrition will increase. And attrition increasing will also increase our operational costs, right? And our inability to therefore to deliver the services at price points that will be competitive will also decrease. What that does not mean, however, Senator, is that the company will lose. Because again, being a multinational company, and language now being secondary, precisely because of the onset of AI, the ability to deliver the services through many channels like chat, email, and everything else, our ability or our competitiveness before that was driven by the fact that we spoke good English is no longer the main driver. So therefore, from this company's perspective, rather than locating them in the Philippines, it can very simply be located in Malaysia or even in Latin America, precisely because ultimately, the only consideration by our clients is where will we get the highest value for our dollar. So sometimes, Mr. Chair, again, it's not solely an issue of us competing with other countries, but it's a matter of the companies making a determination of where it is best to be able to locate, just so that we will be able to retain the client. We can make submissions, most definitely, Mr. Chair, that will support and give empirical numbers and data to illustrate this.
Yeah, that will really help us a lot. No? I think earlier, Chairperson De Manadera excellently explained the legal aspect. I would like to look at the economics aspect naman of this measure, of this IRR, no? And to really help the committee analyze this more holistically, more completely, and come up with the appropriate recommendation. So thank you very much to Attorney Montero. We call on the Japanese Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Shimoda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity this morning. I am Shigeru Shimoda, President of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industries of the Philippines, JCCIPI. Please allow me to express our opinion on CREATE Act, by which JCCIPI and our member companies have been experiencing one of the most critical issues. Incentives are one of the biggest deciding factors for Japanese companies or foreign companies considering expanding or investing in overseas. At a time when there is a need to review the supply chain that has become overly dependent on one Asian country, I'm not saying which one, but one Asian country, I respectfully say that the Philippines should not miss this opportunity to invite quite a big number of foreign investments. In response to population growth in the Philippines, job creation is essential. And for this purpose, we believe that inviting foreign capital is also essential. Attractive incentives should be offered to invite foreign investments, especially in manufacturing, to keep up with competitors from neighboring countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, or even still Thailand. The incentives provided before the enactment of the CREATE Act are the minimum required, and even more attractive proposals are expected to be introduced. On the other hand, if the rules are allowed to change midway through the game, Japanese investors will be forced to change their business plans, and some companies will be forced to withdraw from the Philippines. Potential investors from Japan may hesitate in making investment decisions due to the uncertainty. If the new law, such as CREATE Act, can change the game in the middle, we feel it may happen again. And our investment decisions cannot rely on such uncertainty factors. In order to restore a confidence in investment environment of the Philippines, it is essential that reinstatement of the original PESA incentives for the companies that had invested in the Philippines before the enactment of the CREATE Act. This is actually what I respectfully mentioned in our meeting with President Ferdinando Marcos Jr. on July 28, 2023. In addition to our strong request to bring back VAT-free incentives which our member companies in FESA did not have to apply VAT refund, we also strongly request the committee to reconsider the imposition of a sunset period for the 5% tax on gross income earned, or GIE, granted to the projects or activities registered prior to the enactment of the CREATE Act. The predictability and ease of compliance offered by the 5% GIE incentive in lieu of national and local taxes was a major factor for the decision of many investors from Japan to locate in the Philippines. Retention of the 5% GIE without a sunset period will improve confidence in the country's investment environment. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Shimoda. We call on Mr. Dan Lachica of SAPI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To begin with, I support the statements of Attorney Mike representing IBPAP and AmCham, and also Shimoda-san from the Japan Chamber. As you know, the electronics industry has a lot of multinationals from the US and Japan and EU. In fact, I'll answer your question on the VAT on exports, and then I'll go to our topics. The VAT on constructive exporters, meaning the suppliers to exporters, actually is critical in terms of, well, it actually negates our parts localization plan for SAPI. We import about $25 billion of materials, and the strategy really is to localize that, as you mentioned earlier. Investors look for a local supply chain. We've been successful. So far, we have localized about 300 million pesos in parts, and we're making progress on that. However, VAT imposed on these local suppliers will not only encourage our exporters to just import, but it'll also kill the local industry. When this came about, we did a survey of our members, and we estimated about 40,000 Filipinos losing their jobs when the exporters import. Because if you look at it, 12% VAT, even if you consider the logistics cost, it's still going to be cheaper to import than buy locally. For example, with the logistics costs in the Philippines, say, 40% higher than Vietnam, to compare a country. And worst case, it's 50% erosion on the VAT. Well, that's 6% is still 6%. So that would be the first point in hopefully making an argument towards removing the VAT on constructive exports, I should say. And then to the point of Shimoda-san, the CREATE, I think if I recall the CREATE more version from Congress, it kind of proposes an endpoint of 20% corporate income tax after the transition period. And that's simply not going to work. In fact, I would echo Shimoda-san's pitch to restore the 5%. And why is that? As you know, Mr. Chairman, our power costs, our logistics costs, our human labor cost, and cooling water cost are very high compared to our ASEAN neighbors. And when CREATE was being, I guess, discussed, I specifically mentioned to DOF at that time, it's okay to level the playing field in terms of the incentives, but before we do that, I made a strong appeal to level the playing field first in terms of our operating cost. Because if you are the CEO of a multinational, you will put your new products and technologies in a country where your unit cost is the lowest. And of course, with the Philippines losing the incentives and the high cost, it's not going to be in the Philippines. Unfortunately for our industry, a $49 billion export industry with 3 million direct and indirect workers, we can't really contend with this. We're not getting as much new products and technologies. And what will happen is, and we mentioned this during the hearings 6 years ago, the Senate with Senator Pia Cayetano, you will see an exodus of companies or capital flight at the very least. In fact, 6 years ago, we already reported a diversion of about $3 billion of investments that would have been, allocated to the Philippines. They've gone to China, to Vietnam, to Thailand, and to Malaysia at that time. Of late, there were several European countries, companies that have also exited the Philippines. And one in particular is amusing because the reason given was that, oh, global recession, high interest rates. Well, wait a minute, you're going to Vietnam, it's the same conditions in Vietnam. So they're really masking the real reasons, right? And you also look at the level of investments, the FDIs in the Philippines, which brings in the new technologies. We're not getting, we're getting like maybe 17%, 20% of what Vietnam is getting. And Vietnam, as you know, I think I've sent to your office what Vietnam is doing for the semiconductor industry. One in particular, the country manager of this US company told the Secretary of Finance then, if we push through with this, our company will not expand in the Philippines. Well, we're not the boy who cried wolf. CREATE pushed through. This company invested $1.3 billion in Vietnam instead of the Philippines. We could have had that. 10,000 workers, $1.3 billion investments. And it may not be it may just be the tip of the iceberg, Mr. Chairman. The other concern really is, and this was mentioned by our colleagues, is the authority of the IPA to make decisions in investments. I was elated to hear President Marcos during our November 15 meeting in San Francisco with the semiconductor companies. And what he mentioned, of course, I don't have the details, but this concerns with operating costs and incentives were brought up, and the President mentioned something along the lines of looking at FIRB, and he mentioned specifically PEZA, maybe giving PEZA some of the authority used to have. And again, I don't have the details. I don't want to preempt what's going to be done. But I think this is something that really would be welcome for the investors in terms of, as Shimoda-san said, this was the law before when they invested in the Philippines. Why are we changing it, right? So I see actually capital flight. I see reduced investments in the Philippines. And while the President talked about encouraging investments in semiconductors specifically, moving up the value chain in terms of IC design and semiconductor wafer fab, it's going to be an uphill climb to convince the American multinationals to do so accordingly. The other concern would be, I hear that, with the SIPP and CREATE provisions, there are going to be special incentives for like R&D, training, even power costs. Our concern there is what kind of audit will BIR subject that to? because as you know, VAT refunds, for instance, it takes decades. Yeah, we have companies that have been waiting for decades to have resolution on the VAT refund. And even if you say on paper that you're going to have refunds for this SIPP actions, like training and R&D and power, we're just concerned that it may also take years before they get realized. In fact, we're wondering why companies are not really availing of these benefits. And when I asked several of our members, the answer really was, what for? We're just gonna, we need to do this, and yet, you know, we don't really want to go wait for months, if not decades, to get that refund. You mentioned earlier, I think also Vice Chairman Tulfo, about a cost-benefit analysis. I think that's a very good suggestion. Let's look at the cost-benefit analysis of this revised incentives and see what kind of FDIs we're attracting, what kind of employment we're attracting, especially compared to our tough competitors in Vietnam and Thailand and Malaysia. And I think I'll rest my case for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And I also agree that the semiconductor industry is one industry that we need to take care of, you know, because it's when you invited me to your event, to my pleasant surprise, it contributes to almost half of our exports, you know, and about 60% of more than half of our exports, and also a great chunk, about 30 to 40 billion of our dollar inflows, you know. So that's a huge contribution to the stability of our economy through our dollar inflows as well as through our exports, you know. And as we all know, manufacturing is a very difficult business in our country. There's a lot of manufacturing companies who I've seen struggle to stay afloat, but the semiconductor industry has managed to slowly expand, become a very strong base for our manufacturing industry. The only challenge is how to expand the supply chain. I think that's a challenge that we need to overcome, and that's also one of the things that we are trying to address here, that the adverse consequence of this IRR is the reduction of our supply chain, no? And we're very, very concerned with that. The next will be a call on Attorney Santiago, Ruth Santiago Loyola of the of Chevron, Philippines.
Here. Thank you. So, everyone. So I'm from Chevron Philippines Inc., and I just want to put it on record that we are not a locator, but we will provide our comments to the Create More and the Create law as from the perspective of a supplier. So we pay our taxes upon importation, which includes the VAT, and then if we have significant sales of zero-rated sales, then we will incur excess unutilized input VAT, or we can carry that over to the succeeding years. So being a supplier, Your Honor, we are very careful in imposing the zero-rated VAT to our customers. The reason is that we can be audited by the BIR later on, and we can be subject to the deficiency VAT, which is 12%, and our gross margins are not nowhere near the 12% mark. So what we are saying as a supplier, because of the strict BIR rules, we are also constrained in applying the 0% VAT to our sales to the registered business enterprises, such as those registered with SBMA and PEZA. So for example, the latest BIR IRR speaks about the VAT zero rating requirement for RBEs, which says that the VAT zero rating certification issued by the BIR issued by the concerned investment promotion agency should be sufficient. But this is without prejudice to the conduct of post-audit that the goods are directly and exclusively used by the registered export enterprises in its registered activity. So now, as supplier, there is an undue burden on us to prove this fact. So in some cases, Mr. Chair, I will be very candid, we actually refuse to supply to these PEZA entities because of the potential VAT exposure on our part. Because the BIR can say that, okay, so the VAT zero rating certificate issued by PEZA is sufficient, but there is always a colatilia which says that we can be subject to the post-audit powers of the BIR, and unfortunately, there are no definite rules on this, meaning if we get audited like 2 or 3 years down the road, we don't know what the BIR will require us to submit so that we can substantiate, so we can prove that really the product that was purchased from us, in this case, this is fuel, is really used in the registered activity of the registered business enterprise. So that's the predicament coming from a supplier point of view. That's it for us, Your Honor.
Thank you, thank you. I have also questions, but I'll reserve that later on as when we finish all the resource persons. So everyone will be given a chance to be heard, and also we can record the comments into the records. We'll call on Mr. Barrera of the Exports Confederation, Philippine Exports Confederation, Incorporated.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. We are from Phil Exporters Confederation. That's an umbrella organization where we have all about 3,000 members, and almost 95% of them are small and medium in enterprises. Because the big companies like San Miguel and so on, they can solve their own problems. So we try to solve the problems for our small and medium micro industries. Now, I know there's a lot of confusion going on, so I'd like to propose that my discussion would be more of a brainstorming thing. And I'd like to say, when there's a lot of confusion, I'd like to propose that we go back to the basics and go back to before they create and before they train. And let's go back to the original cross-border rule that had been prevailing. This cross-border rule, incidentally, was put into existence basically right after the war, I think, when the United Nations Development Council wanted to go into globalization, free trade, and so on. And so they came up with a protocol, an international agreement among all countries that internal taxes of a country should not be carried on into a foreign buyer. In other words, a foreign buyer should not be made to pay for internal country taxes. And that concept has been approved, and it's internationally practiced. However, along the line, as the decades went on, the Philippines the legislative and the executive branches of the government started to get confused. They started to look at these VAT refunds, which is technically just an implementation of the cross-border rule, internationally recognized. They started to think of it as an incentive. Now, an incentive is something that is created by a country because it wants to help industry and support and et cetera, and natural, the country can make its own rules for its own incentive. However, this VAT refund is an international practice, recognizable internationally, and so it should not be subjected to country rules effectively, because we are kind of modifying by our own selves, and we might end up with VAT refund rules that are not being practiced by our competitor countries. This is a global competition. Uh, the other countries may not be so restrictive, and so we now kind of kill ourselves we shoot ourselves in our own feet by creating things internally. So I would say that let's respect the cross-border rules. Let's not look at it, not even call it as a VAT incentive. I'm allergic. Let's drop the word incentive as far as VAT refunds. VAT refunds should be implemented also transaction per transaction, because it says the cross-border rule was talking only about exports. It doesn't say exporters. It says exports. It's a transaction. A transaction. So let's limit our focus on transactions. So a company exports one container. That container should be analyzed by the BIR and look at the inputs that went into the what container and so on, and refunded accordingly. But we got confused. We put, there was a certain law that said that, to get the VAT refunds, you should be called an exporter, and an exporter is one that has exported for 3 years, 3 years record of 70% of export. We were coming up with quantities, 1 year record, 3 year record, kind of arbitrarily. And so this was putting artificial restrictions already. What about an exporter who just started 10% export? He cannot get a VAT refund on that. Then it became anti-developmental. We have a lot of new would-be exporters applying to us, but they find out that they cannot even make a competitive offer. First offer pa lang, because they cannot assume safely that the price that they put in, which is an assumption that they will be refunded VAT, will actually happen. So they take the safe precaution that walang VAT sila, walang VAT refund, so they put a 12% output VAT on their price, their first offer to a company abroad. Natural, talo sila. They won't get even looked upon. No? They'll be refused. So they cannot even get a first export because of that requirement again. It takes sometimes they are waiting time and so on. So let's make it easy. Any export by any company, by anybody, may VAT refund what they exported. That, I think, should be the basic reason for requirement for registration, if ever we still want to have a registration. But our concept is, let's try to diminish these artificial restrictions, make life simpler for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We call on Attorney Gio Caniga of Reyes Takandong. Any comments?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm Attorney Romel Jocaniga. I'm from Reyes Takandong. I'm one of the tax partners. We would like to thank the Honorable Chair for inviting us to share our inputs. We do share the concerns of the related agencies from CDC, PEZA, and we hope that with this committee hearing, the inconsistencies that have been raised would be clarified, and the distinction between export and domestic market enterprises be removed. We do also share the concerns of the private sector, particularly some of our clients who have had refunds or assessments with the BIR. We also hope that the clarity in terms of the rules will help our clients and investors in making decisions in their investments. And as mentioned a while ago, the stability of our laws and its interpretation will be a great help in terms of moving forward and being more competitive in the global scale. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Can you elaborate further on the, you mentioned refund, no? I also heard from the other resource persons issues on the refund. I've heard this many times. It takes time and it's a lot of disapprovals. But can you elaborate from your experience and your interaction with your clients? What do they encounter so far as the refunds and other disapprovals?
Mr. Chair, there's always been an issue with, of course, from the point of view of the taxpayer, they will always base their refund on the law. And the law also requires the submission of documents, and the submission of documents have always been the subject of an audit by the BIR. And from our experience, depending on the timing on when the refund was actually filed, there are times when the BIR would consider a refund claim. They will deny it on the basis of the lack of documentation. But from the point of view of the client, they will rely, for example, from a certification from an investment promotion agency. And if it comes to the point where the client will say, we have the certification from the investment promotion agency that we are entitled to the refund claim, but when it is presented with the tax authorities, they do not agree with that interpretation. And I think it was mentioned by Attorney Montero a while ago that we do hope that the certifications from the investment promotion agencies be given due weight, given that they are the primary agency that really determines whether a taxpayer is actually entitled to the refund or not.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's common with the BPO industry, what I heard earlier. We'll call on ConWep, Ms. Carlillo.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Rosette Carrillo, and I'm from the Confederation of Wearables Exporters of the Philippines. We represent mostly the exporters placed in IPAs. Our investors are here since for a long, long time, for more than 40 years. They stay here because there's competitiveness in terms of the worker skills. We cater to global brands, and our members are also global players, which means they don't have just manufacturing set up in the Philippines, but also mostly in other ASEAN countries such as Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos, and other ASEAN countries. We source as much as possible, almost 100% of any local available materials, especially for packaging. Also, if there are accessories available, we source it from locally. So we have, before COVID started, we have about 290,000 workers. Right now, it has dwindled down to less than 250,000 workers. We are the only sector, I think, in the export industry, in manufacturing in particular, that employs labor-intensive workers and are willing to hire at high school level. What our exporters or our business sector would like to maintain, as echoed by all our colleagues in the different export industries and by PEZA and Clark Development Council, is that we want consistency and it's been reiterated by several speakers before me. We want the 5% GIE, the duty exemption, the VAT exemption, and the zero VAT rating. We compete with mostly ASEAN countries. And in this year alone, our industry, apparel exports alone, are experiencing for the first time double-digit, 90% decline, and the total wearables have experienced 22% decline. And the whole impact of this discrepancy between the IRR and the CREATE law has significantly affected the exporters' cash flow. It has affected their ability to be able to use efficiently their limited resources for production and manufacturing. We are here to support efforts of the Senate and the recent achievements are done by the House in making sure that the government in all its law is clear and that we work with efficient government agencies like PESA, CDC, who are working together closely with exporters to really maintain business above level. And we hope that the issues with regards to this matter shall also be addressed. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. We'll call on Mr. Mon Abrera of the Ease of Doing Business Task Force on Paying Taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, I'm not yet sure if I'm still the co-chair of Ease of Doing Business because I've been away for 2 years. Although we still work with Director General Perez, and I may represent as advisor of the International Tax and Investment Center based in Washington, D.C., Mr. Chair, and the Asian Consulting Group. First, Mr. Chair, while I support or in agreement in principles with the position of DOF and BIR in adopting a performance-based and time-bound tax incentive system, clearly there is not just inconsistency but limiting of the scope of to whom it is applicable. Section 293M of the CREATE law clearly defines registered business enterprise, providing its own negative list. But the regulation used or adopted instead registered export enterprise, which clearly explicitly disqualified the domestic market enterprises. So that's obviously the position of most of the other invited colleagues here. Second, Mr. Chair, in relation to the concern on VAT refund, if I remember it correctly, the automatic approval of VAT was removed from CREATE law or train law in view of baka ma-abuse. Although the proposal was initially based on the Ease of Doing Business law, na dapat automatic ma-approve if they cannot act and release the refund. My apprehension before on that removal is BIR is actually conflicted when it comes to processing VAT refund because they are a tax agency. So they really have a tendency to audit or assess first, not because they don't want to release the VAT refund, but mainly because they are pressured with the targets and the priorities really collection. So I don't know if it's possible to actually consider removing it from the BIR. Similar apprehension, Mr. Chair, when the CREATE law included all the incentives that empowers BIR to interpret it. As a tax agency, again, they are conflicted because the incentives are not necessarily revenue-driven, but it's otherwise. So the refund in that case is also similar. So if that is possible. And in relation to the opening remark of the Vice Chair on audit, if I may just comment, Mr. Chair, we have already submitted our proposal to your committee on the possible adoption of a risk-based audit. Currently, the BIR has an admin policy of conducting the audit from 180 days to 240 days. In short, that should be closely monitored. But if I am correct, it's no longer strictly implemented. So under the risk-based audit, as a former examiner myself, Mr. Chair, the burden is so much on the examiners, but they don't really have individual targets. So in short, there is a target per revenue district office, but the moment the cases are assigned, there is so much discretion as to the settlement. So even the monitoring, does it mean if I am compliant, or if like those who are availing tax incentives, should I not qualify as the least priority audit, or I should not be audited anymore because I am like above the threshold? So who knows, because it becomes discretionary. So I guess under the risk-based audit, only high-risk enterprises or industries will be subjected to audit, and that relieves the examiner from having many cases to audit, given that they are outnumbered versus the number of millions of taxpayers in the Philippines. It's really impossible for them to audit. And given the impact of our audit, Mr. Chair, it's still less than 2% of the total collection. So I think it's a good investment if we will just focus on those which are really non-compliant and not really paying taxes, or in short, tax evaders, rather than kulang lang ng dokumento, or kulang lang ng information, or wrong spelling, parang grade school. So hindi na mapaprocess or madidisallow na. Again, I sympathize as well to our examiners. Parang wala naman sa chamber na to ang naka-appreciate ng work ng examiners. Mahirap po maging BIR examiner, Mr. Chair. But I guess the law is burdening them. So maybe we can also look into a possible way of unburdening our BIR examiners, but at the same time making them effective and removing the too much discretion on their part, Mr. Chair. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments on the implementation of CREATE? Thank you for your suggestion on the audit, LOA. Definitely will take your suggestion on that, and we'll have a separate whole hearing on that as requested by our Vice Chair, Senator Tulfo, and we'll request Mr. Mon to join us on that. But on the implementation of CREATE, and I know that you are also a practicing accountant and you have clients. Any feedback from your clients on how CREATE is being implemented? How is it impacting their businesses? How it changed their investment decision making, as what the other
Mr. Chair, I share with the sentiments of my colleagues here. Marami po talaga either na nag-decide na lang mag-import or nag-defer ng kanilang mga investments or purchases, mainly because of the confusion or uncertainty whether it will still be considered VAT exempt, zero rated, or will they pursue refund or not? I mean, I think it all falls under the assumption that with the CREATE law things will be easier, but it seems the confusion created more challenges rather than making it easy for all businesses, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. We'll call on Attorney Fabian de los Santos of SGV.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair, no? And again, thank you also for giving us the opportunity to share our inputs. No, I'm Fabian de los Santos. I'm the tax partner of SGV. No? And I guess in the interest of time, I don't have to reiterate, but I fully support what the resource speakers have mentioned. No, that the uncertainties and the implementation of the CREATE law have somehow created some issues. No. That has, to some extent, negatively put the country at a disadvantage, no, insofar as attracting more investors to invest in our country. No. As I've said, I'm not going to reiterate those that I fully support. No, but there's maybe I have to digress a bit, no, because there's that proposal in the Create More bill that proposes to impose RBE local tax, and I think that's something that I don't know if that's really the intention, because the RBE local tax is something that is an imposition in addition to the local tax that is already presently being imposed. No? And the local business tax is supposedly exempt. The RBE is supposed to be exempt from local business tax during the income tax holiday period. But my understanding is that the RBE local tax will be imposed, no, even during the income tax duration of the income tax holiday. Second would be after the lapse of the income tax holiday. I understand that this will be under SCIT if the RBE opts to use SCIT, and that will be in lieu of the RBE local tax. No? But what if the RBE would opt to use the enhanced deduction Does that mean that during the enhanced deduction period, the RBE will be subject to local business tax, the existing local business tax, and at the same time be subject also to the RBE local tax? So there will be double local tax imposition in that case. No? The second one, which is not so much on create, but since we're talking about the VAT, is the imposition of 12% VAT on toll manufacturers rendering services to non-residents. No? I think this is something also that the committee may want to consider, because if services rendered like BPOs, no, and other non-manufacturing services rendered to non-residents are zero rated, why would manufacturing like toll manufacturing, you know, services rendered to non-residents be subject to 12% VAT? That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Fabian. I failed to call on another IPA, the BOI. I think BOI is one of our major investment promotion vehicle or agency. Any comments?
Thank you, Mr.
Attorney
Chair.
Portosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So ready pa. Just on the matter, Mr. Chair, we identified actually areas for clarification in terms of the textual provisions of the CREATE Act and its IRR. So number one, the coverage for the VAT exemption and VAT zero rating on local purchases, whether it's applicable also for domestic market enterprises. The law did not distinguish, that's very clear, but in the IRR, in terms of the implementation, it was specified that it's only the exporters. We're talking here of RBEs that are registered under the CREATE Act. So later in my third point, we will talk about existing RBEs that were affected in the transition, Mr. Chair. So for the first part, the coverage, the applicability of the VAT exemption, the VAT zero rating on local purchases, we in the BOI actually proposed before or recommended that we identify strategic domestic market enterprises that could be given or that could also be allowed to enjoy the local, the VAT exemption on local purchases. We identified, for example, strategic domestic market enterprises like for pharmaceutical, for example, we have additives and sugar. For metals, or aerospace industries, for example, we have local metal fabricators, and so these are local available products, raw materials for such industries, and even services like surface treatment facilities for metals as well. These are very critical for the development of the aerospace industry. We will provide the committee with the other areas or industries that we think should be identified as a strategic domestic market enterprise that should be also look at giving them the VAT exemption and local purchases, Mr. Chair, so that they won't import, and then at the same time we are developing our local industries. So that's the first point. The second point is on the period of the incentive, because we're taking it as an incentive under the CREATE Act. The period for 12 years for domestic market, that is for the duty exemption on importation of capital equipment, raw materials, etc., and 17 years for the exporters. So again, the CREATE Act did not provide for a period, and I think this is a point for clarification. We just, we also attended the meetings in the lower house under the chairmanship of Kong Salceda, where some areas are being clarified in the substitute bill, and it is one of those. And in the current proposal, it says there that as long as the RBE is maintaining its registration and is in good standing and is exporting 70%, it will be qualified for the incentive. So it's as long as it is registered. But again, in the lower house version, the enumeration of transactions there are just relevant for exporters. And they provided there a provision for a domestic market enterprise with capital investment of 500 million US dollars, or around 30 billion pesos. So in the BOI, we're looking at that as the mechanism to have the strategic domestic for the VAT exemption and local purchases, Mr. Chair. So we are looking at that. Then the third point, Mr. Chair, is the transition. So the CREATE Act did not provide for or did not touch on the did not provide for a sunset provision on the non-income tax related incentives of existing enterprises. So for BOI, there's actually our incentives under EO 226 is just 4 years of ITH, or 6 years is Pioneer and then Pioneer, and then it's just duty exemption. We don't provide VAT. We only provide certification for exporters, and that is under the tax code before, not under EO 226. But what was affected in the transitory, Mr. Chair, are those inside the zones, particularly those registered also with Clark, which are considered as domestic, because their law did not require them to just register exporters. They are not even bound to follow the IPP, or the investment priorities plan before, unlike the passage of CREATE, where all IPAs would have to look at one menu of incentives and then one menu of qualified activities. So during the transition, what we have in the CREATE Act is just 10 years for all of those availing the 5% GIE instead of forever. And then for BOIA registered, they will only finish the 4 years or 6 years of ITH, and then the duty exemption is provided in their terms and conditions. So after 4 or 6 years, BOI registered enterprises, they're done. They're okay. But in the CREATE Act, we address their issues. And in fact, Mr. Chair, we work closely with the FIRB, the DOF, as mentioned earlier by ASAC Juvie. All of those things that we did also with the BIR to address all the concerns. And I'm quite surprised now I'm not sure if there are still pending, but we also received a letter from the DBM actually instructing us to already advise all the those that have pending VAT refund claims. So we're talking here, Mr. Chair, of those affected by the transition, not under not under those registered under the CREATE Act. So we passed the CREATE Act in 2021, and so there were payments made during and before the passage of the CREATE and during the pandemic. So I think those are the issues now pending VAT refund claims, and we advise the PEZA to also provide us a list of those that have pending VAT refund claims, along with the assurances of the DBM that there is actually corresponding budget for that. And the issue on VAT refund is also being monitored by the Office of the President, Mr. Chair. So we've been submitting reports, our interventions, like providing the negative list for direct and exclusive. Again, that is prior to CREATE, it's directly attributable. So the BIR also has a very broad list of what could be considered, and practically everything that is related to the activity are covered. There's no issue. But again, with the passage of CREATE, it was changed to direct and exclusive, and therefore there is an obligation upon the IPAs to determine. And so we actually came up with a negative list, Mr. Chair, and we think that that should already address the concerns of our RBEs. With the negative list, there are only 6 there that are not covered, and then there is also a window there for them to justify to the IPA concern that they are actually, that this the item in the negative list is actually relevant to them. For example, we have here janitorial services. We've included in the negative list, but let's say a hospital that is registered qualified activity under the SIPP, then they can justify that it is very important for the operation of hospital operations or services. So again, it is given to the IPA concerned. Again, Mr. Chair, just on the point on audit, that's something I think that we cannot remove. That's a reserve power on the part of the BIR and the COA, the post audit. We already reached, I think, a milestone in terms of the documentary requirements under the BIR revenue regulation. We proposed, the DTI proposed actually to streamline the process, Mr. Chair, and we wrote BIR in February, and I think they issued in June a streamlined list from 30+ list of documents for the VAT refund. It's already down to, I think, 9 administratively, together with the DOF, FIRB, BIR, and the concerned IPAs. But there are some provisions in the CREATE that should be clarified, and I think it's being also under the consideration of the committee once the lower house is also has finalized its proposal, Mr. Chair. And we will also provide our inputs to that, Mr. Chair, coming from the implementation of the CREATE Act since its passage. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney. Thank you for that. I have a question to Mr. Panga for PEZA. PEZA also has domestic market enterprises.
Well, Your Honor, before the CREATE, there was only one DME, domestic market oriented, that opted to locate inside the economic zone, but we simply followed the BIR menu, BOI menu of incentives. So in that particular incentives on VAT, there was really no grant of zero VAT or VAT exemption. It's just the duty-free importation. Except for, that was Yama, to be particular.
In your zones right now, do you have locators who are considered DMEs?
Well, only recently because of the CREATE. Under the
Okay.
CREATE regime, we can now register domestic market oriented. And these are big ticket that registered with us.
Okay.
But then, under the rules, they're not supposed to enjoy any VAT exemption.
But this new one, which company is this?
For instance, the ICE, which is one of the biggest ice cream makers in the world.
And I would assume that they are allowed because they are within the SIPP.
Well, that's the problem, Your Honor, because even if they're inside the economic zone, and despite the SIPP, the rules are very clear that for domestic market-oriented, they cannot enjoy the zero VAT or VAT exemption on their importation.
Prior to that, everyone was an export enterprise.
Well, yes, predominantly we cater to export-oriented.
And they enjoy zero rating and duty-free.
Well, that has been the rule, even way back in 1969, that has always been the policy and the rule. And so we inherited that from the old EPSA, stocks and duty-free.
Yeah. So the only casualty I would say is the new one, the new locator that located in your PEZA zones. Tama ba? I mean, let me just refocus again to the IRR and the resolutions on the inconsistency. I just want to understand on the ground, no? Because kayo yun on the ground. How many locators in PEZA, how many locators of your zones are affected by this inconsistency?
Well, practically, Your Honor, all were affected because of the inconsistencies. But it's not to say that BIR or the FIRB has not done anything about it. But just to highlight the point that there were inconsistencies, it prompted BIR to revise its own regulations. In fact, I may cite the inclusion of support to export. In the very words of the IRR and the BIR RMCs, it only recognizes export. But then we argued we have entities like support to export, the likes of developers, embedded utilities, facilities. So because of our argument, we made a case with them, they revised and to include support to export. So it's now expanded, the coverage, but they just call it support to export, different from domestic market oriented.
Under the law, under the IRR, export companies or export enterprises can enjoy the zero-rated and duty-free.
Right, but Your Honor, in the course of implementing it, so there were two issues. One on the exclusion of support to export.
Okay.
So that was revised to include support to export. So that was resolved. The other one on the limiting the availment of incentives by putting in that colatilla, that qualifier that it must be direct and exclusive use. And this is where, in the course of implementing the rules, it becomes discretionary rather than rules-based. And so many companies were slapped, payment of VAT, and they have the option to challenge it before CTA, or they will just settle or pay the VAT without hoping for VAT refund in the process.
I'll go to that, no, yung direct and exclusive use. I think that came out in many of the comments from our resource persons. But I want to focus first on that inconsistency because that's the topic that was within the three resolutions. No? And I just want to understand from PEZA's operation, how this inconsistency affected the locators. I understand that most of your locators, probably 190+%, are export oriented. Therefore, they're not affected by this inconsistency. Is that an accurate statement?
Actually, Your Honor, it's the other way around. So they were affected because of this, precisely because of these inconsistencies. For example, yung linagay na rules on cost allocation. So where they make a distinction pursuant to that definition on direct and exclusive use, so that even if you will conduct your business inside the economic zone, you happen to be export-oriented, if you engage in activities like admin, finance, as if these are not part and parcel of their operations, they will have to go through that process of separating it from their eligible activities. And in the process, they will have to pay VAT on it. That's why, Your Honor, if I may cite exaggerate it, sometimes the workers would have to laugh about it, saying that if they go to the CR, comfort room, and use water in it, if it's located in an admin area, hey, you will pay VAT on it. You use the CR inside the factory area, you don't pay VAT for it. So somehow it becomes ridiculous in the...
There are two issues here. No? One is the zero rating and the VAT exemption on purchases. And then the other one is the direct, what is direct and exclusive use. No? I think these are two, from the conversations and from the comments that I heard, these are the two most prevalent. No? So on the application of zero rating and VAT exempt, in the IRR, it's just limited to export enterprises. But my thinking is PEZA is dominated by export enterprises. So in other words, this VAT zero rating, the IRR, is applicable to you. Tama? But what's happening is it's the direct and exclusive use that's now being is the limiting factor. Is that the correct?
Tama po yan. In fact, the irony of it, if a locator will import from abroad production-related materials, no questions asked. You try to buy the same items from the local market, that's when all these rules apply. On direct exclusive use, even if rules say that they will have to operate inside the economic zone, they still go through that cost allocation, direct and exclusive use definition.
In other words, even though the IRR is favorable to the exporters, it's not being applied because of the direct and exclusive use provision. Is that a correct
Yes, sir.
statement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Attorney Montero, you wanna? I see you. You wanted to
Sorry.
press the
Hindi
button,
po.
so go ahead.
Sorry.
We're open to comments.
Yeah.
Again, you guys are, you know your business. You are in the operations. You have your you have more stake in this discussion. So feel free to join in the conversation. Go ahead, attorney.
Thank you, Senator. I apologize. I was just very intently listening to DG Teo. No? But I want to reiterate that it's precisely because we're exporters, which is why we were prejudiced, no, by the more specific requirement that our purchases need to be direct and exclusive for them to be zero rated. Because the fact that we're exporters does not give us the ability to pass on any VAT. And therefore, anything that's passed on to us, right, we need to take it on as an additional burden or additional cost. So if I were to revert back to pre-create, how it used to be is that it was totally VAT-free, Mr. Senator, that our purchases were without VAT and our exports were also without VAT. That precisely gives us the edge of competitiveness, no? Because then the price points would really not account for any VAT component on both sides, no? But again, just to reiterate and I think DG Teo was talking about all the conversations that we had with BOI at this time when we were talking about the resolution, no? Because the most recent issuance, which is RR 3-2023, which is now known as the negative list, no, is supposedly just to remedy the situation, which I illustrated a while ago. And by the way, Mr. Chair, illustration that I gave on the HMO was really just the one that was most pronounced, because the HMOs really came forward and said that, because I guess maybe the quandary that all of the parties find themselves in, Mr. Chair, is on the one hand, we are the ones that are supposedly given the benefit of RR 3-2023. But then again, the statutory taxpayer, as they are called, are really our service providers. So they're the ones that stand to be assessed if in case they do not pass on the VAT to us. So if they come to us and we tell them that under RR 3-2023, all our purchases should be zero rated, they will not take our word for it. And if we tell them that there is a process that is embedded within 3-2023, and the process, as has been mentioned already, is with the IPAs, they will also not believe in that process because they know down the road it's the BIR that will go after them. So ultimately, despite the passage of RR 3-2023, and quite understandably, Mr. Chair, no? Because again, looking at it from their perspective, they're the ones that, as quite honestly, Mr. Chair, there have been many side agreements. These are not illegal ones, but complementary side agreements that were signed already with our service providers. Again, because they're the ones that the BIR will run after. But they will pass it on to us. So the agreement is to the extent that if it is passed on to them, they will recover from us, which is the one that creates all this confusion and unnecessary noise, Mr. Chair, that we can totally avoid. By the way, Mr. Chair, just on this point, even again, as I said, even if the issue was really most pronounced in HMO, as we speak, our biggest cost, the sources from our biggest cost are already beginning to ask the same question. These are the utility providers and our landlords. And to I guess maybe piggyback on DG Theo's example, now they are asking, so how much of your people are actually operations when it comes to consuming electricity or telco? And also how much of maybe the footprint is not very difficult because we really isolate our operations from the support. But again, the point is that all of this is necessary for us to be able to deliver the revenue. The root of all of these incentives, Mr. Chair, is our ability to actually deliver export revenue in foreign currency. There should be no bifurcation between who does what, because without HR, without finance, without legal, there is that inability to actually comply with that export commitment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, point of inquiry, is it not part of the automation that that can be used so that BIR will no longer, not necessarily meddle, because I don't think we should stop them from auditing, but at least it doesn't become predicament or blocking the way of making things faster or easy, because it's clear in the law. So I don't know if that's part of the automation, but because in other countries it's automated, so it's in the system. Even the basic refund as tourists, it's in the system. So the government has the access to the system, whether customs, tax agency, or whoever, it's in the system. So if that's the case, then the issue on documentation or whatever satisfies BIR. Kasi parang nangyayari, BIR is the evil that they block. They're the reason why things do not move faster. I didn't say BIR is the evil. I say it seems that, so if it's automated, then they don't need to really check on the availment of incentives, and they can just focus on audit and investigation if there are under declaration or tax evasion.
But I don't think it's automated. You mean the refund, no? What you're pertaining to is the refund. I don't think it's automated, but let's ask the BIR, no? If the refund process is already automated.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. The process is still manual, so the examiners still have to check the records of the taxpayer and to check whether there's compliance with the requirements under the law and the rules.
Mr. Chair, I think that's the problem, because they really have to check it every now and then. So if there can be a mechanism by which BIR is assured that since IPA already approved it, or it's already in compliance with the law, their business should be whether there was under declaration, not whether they're compliant with the incentive criteria.
We'll go back to that automation. No? I think that's also in the law. But I'll go to CDC, to the President, Attorney Devanadera. I want to ask the same question what I asked to PESA. How many locators in CDC are considered domestic, and how many are exporters, and how many were affected by this alleged inconsistency?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, from my record, Your Honor, for the create incentives, we have one domestic enterprise affected, but with the transitory provided with incentives, our export enterprises, we have 235. For domestic, we have 169, Your Honor. So,
235 exporters.
opo. And then sa domestic po, 169. Now, for the transitory without the incentives, we have, of course, the 760 without incentives. That brings us to a total of the 1,170 locators that I mentioned earlier. This is our statistics as of October 31, 2023, Your Honor.
Is it correct that the 169, these are domestic enterprises?
Opo.
And they're the ones not enjoying the zero-rated and the VAT exemption?
Yes po.
Correct. Okay. And what type of industries are these 169? More or less lang, just give us a
We have
picture.
the restaurants,
Mm.
those things. And then I think we have a few retailers.
Okay. Do they export some of their products?
No.
Or do they just completely cater to
The local.
the local?
Yes, Your
Okay,
Honor.
okay.
And Your Honor, maybe it will be easier to appreciate because Clark has evolved not just as an industrial park, but also as a tourism destination. So we have all those domestic enterprises sprouting.
Okay. And the domestic, the 169 domestic corporations or domestic enterprises, are they also involved in manufacturing?
No, Your Honor.
Just these are purely
Usually.
leisure, travel and leisure.
Service, yes, Your Honor.
Travel and leisure and service. Okay.
And we may say, Your Honor, they also provide the needs of the export-oriented enterprises. Like we have all those convenience stores, and these are necessary because we have 137,000 employees, regular employees. It's a big community.
Thank you for that clarification, Attorney Devanadera. I also saw in the list DOF. Is DOF here? Ikaw na ba? Si Ralph Di Parine?
Good afternoon po,
Is
Mr.
that-
Chair.
Ikaw ba yun? BOC.
BOC po.
Masulat dito DOF eh. I'm sorry for that. No? Okay. All right. Any comments from BIR?
Good afternoon once again.
After hearing all of the all of the resource persons, any comments? But I don't suggest you address each and every concern. No, I just to give us some broad strokes, starting with the resolutions, and also some of if you wanna give some rejoinder on some of the issues. But just broad strokes lang. Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor. We thank the committee for inviting us to be part of this discussion, and we acknowledge that there were issues nga in the implementation of the CREATE, and we already introduced some measures to to address them. One nga is the issuance of Revenue Regulations 3-2023, which now allows the RBEs to avail of the VAT zero rating on their local purchase of goods and services merely on the basis of the IPA certification. So before, they have to go to BIR and secure a prior certification for VAT zero rating. And now they don't have to do that. On the basis of the IPA certification, they can avail of the VAT zero rating. And then we also issued RR number 13-2023, which now allows domestic market enterprises to register as VAT taxpayers and be able to claim VAT refund on their input taxes without losing their 5% gross income taxation. Also, based on the amended CREATE IRR, registered export enterprises which with expired income tax-based incentives, they may continue to avail of the VAT zero rating on their local purchase of goods and services during the transitory period. So that's now allowed. It is our humble submission that the BIR revenue issuances, specifically RR number 21-2021 and RMC number 24-2022, are in accordance with the CREATE provisions and its implementing rules and regulations on grounds that have already been explained by the FIRB and DOF. We will continue to work and cooperate with the various stakeholders to make the necessary steps to have the effective implementation of the CREATE law. That's all, Your Honor.
Thank you for that. And lastly, we have also from NEDA. We invited Mr. Ballester.
Good afternoon.
Any comments?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Honorable Senator. Thank you for recognizing NEDA. We fully support the efforts to resolve the apparent inconsistency between the CREATE Act and its IRR, including the various regulations issued by BIR and even the CDC Memorandum Circular, particularly on the scope of the application of VAT zero rating and VAT exemption importation of the RBEs. NEDA, along with the rest of the economic team, specifically DUF and DBM with DTI, has been very firm to resolve the issue. As early as July this year, Mr. Chair, the said agencies convened meetings and sent a joint memorandum for the President informing him that essentially the major issues will be resolved through the amendment of the implementing rules and regulations of the CREATE Act. Actually, Mr. Chair, there was this agreement to have the amendment to be done back then, around August.
My staff just confirmed with me that was August.
That
I
was
remember.
August,
but the amendment will be on that particular particular provision on RBEs versus domestic enterprises?
Essentially, yes, Mr. Chair, it covers that particular area, Mr. Chair.
But November na ngayon.
Opo, Mr. Chair, and we haven't received an official communication as to the convening, and there were perhaps, Mr. Chair, there were changes structurally, particularly maybe in DUF. That's why it has not yet it has not moved already.
And that was in the form of a resolution from NEDA?
It's a joint, we joined, Mr. Chair, with the meetings called by the DOF, and that is a joint memorandum. That was
Joint between which agencies?
DBM, DOF, and then with DTI.
May we request for a copy of that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will provide you the
Right, thank
copy
you.
because that is available for us, for agencies. We'll definitely provide the...
Thank you. You may continue, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair. And fast forward at present, the economic agencies is working closely, of course, with the House Committee on Ways and Means on the Create More, as mentioned a while ago, Mr. Chair. And then the latest version was circulated with incorporating the initial comments of concerned agencies. For this, Mr. Chair, actually the NEDA has run a simulation on the foregone revenue in the transitory period, in the post-transitory period. We tried also to do a simulation, Mr. Chair, on the impact of the investments to be done by our RBEs. But unfortunately, Mr. Chair, we are able only to do the ex post, meaning the the recent 3 years as provided by the FRB, because investment decisions is very difficult to calculate. So what we have only are the ex-post data. And so we believe, Mr. Chair, that even with the revenue loss, there could be some recoup from the potential investments, although, again, the caveat is it's very difficult to estimate the ex-ante investments to be done by RRBs. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's submit to us the joint memorandum or joint resolution. And that joint resolution, what is the NEDA's position on that joint resolution?
Well, Mr. Chair, in that MFP that was drafted jointly by the agencies, if I may, Mr. Chair, the indirect exporters in particular, Mr. Chair, which are also DMAs, no, they're allowed now to have their VAT zero rating. And then, Mr. Chair, of course, the what do you call this? The DMS have to be registered only so that they can avail of that VAT incentives. So these are primarily touching the discussions right now, Mr. Chair. Although in the current version or in the draft bill in the House, where we are currently working, it is gradually entering into that particular draft. But definitely, Mr. Chair, will provide you the copy so that it will be clearer to the committee. We have also, Mr. Chair, the clarification done in terms of the administrative functions by the BIR, wherein there are several, what do you call this, easing of the transactions for our domestic market enterprises. So that's part of the coverage, including, Mr. Chair, some suggestions or some directions moving forward for the EOPT bill. So that EOPT bill is fits into the to the needs of our RBEs. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for that. Well, the intention of this committee is to resolve the three resolutions by coming up with a recommendation. The recommendation can be status quo, can be requesting or compelling the DOF to adhere to the true intention of the law. But for today's session, we are not yet ready to make that recommendation. But all of the comments of our resource persons will definitely help us craft that appropriate recommendation. What we need from everyone, and this is a very important request, is number one, a position paper regarding the three resolutions. Number two, and this is on beyond the three resolutions, a position paper on the implementation of CREATE. And then number three, a simulation on the impact of the inconsistency. I think no one can argue with me that President De Manadera, who's a former Secretary of Justice, have articulated very well the legal interpretation and the legal consequence of the inconsistency. I think she presented very well her arguments why it is called inconsistent, no? And why that provision should be striked out and replaced with the true intention of the law. I want to go beyond that. No? I want to go beyond what is the economic implication as well as financial implication of this inconsistency. I would like to request from the IPAs a detailed simulation on how it affected the competitiveness of your locators. Maybe we can sample 2 or 3 locators. How many domestic enterprises were affected by this inconsistency, and how their products became uncompetitive. No? So I'm just giving you an idea on that, on what kind of simulation do we need in order to come up with a complete recommendation on addressing the three resolutions. But definitely we got a lot of information from all of you guys today. And we will continue this hearing next week, and we will request the FIRB. Just to complete the picture, we'd like to request from the FIRB an update on the implementation of CREATE, as well as cost-benefit analysis on the grant of incentives, as well as some updates from the FIRB. We have to remember one of the biggest reform in CREATE is to empower FIRB. No? So we want to also understand what FIRB have been doing or accomplishing throughout these years. So we'll suspend the hearing today, and we'll have another one next week to continue these three resolutions, and we will issue a supplemental agenda to discuss other concerns surrounding CREATE and also updates on the implementation of CREATE. So with that, I thank everyone. Any parting words? Any suggestions? If you have any suggestion or any parting words before we suspend this hearing?
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yes, yes.
May,
Attorney,
if
go
I
ahead.
may,
Yeah, go ahead,
I just focused on the VAT, but I will be remiss in representation of my industry if I don't also talk about, and very quickly at that, Mr. Chair, just some of the other points that are inconsistent, no, and that have really impacted our industry. There are three. I will not talk about so much about the work from home, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure that this is the proper forum, but that's one. The two others, one has been mentioned quite frequently, but I guess the perspective that I want to mention, so Attorney De Los Santos talked about the proposal to, in fact, impose an RBE local business tax. But even as we speak, and even while presumably the wordings of CREATE was quite clear on who is supposed to benefit from the same. And in fact, I want to recognize the DOF because they did come up with an order this year, DOF 33-2023, that recognizes the exemptions of those that are enjoying incentives from the non-imposition of local business taxes. But that being said, Mr. Chair, it is a nightmare for many locators that they are still being asked to pay local business taxes. And in fact, it has even come to the point that sometimes when we argue against it, the response of the local government units is, show us the receipt that we gave to you. So it's a little bit sad to realize that we have to produce a document that they were the ones that actually gave to us when we paid the 2% that is owing to them on the basis of the split between the 5% that we pay based on the GIE. So that's one very glaring inconsistency, Mr. Chair, that again needs to be addressed precisely because, again, it's one of those things that really is an irritant with respect to foreign investors, and it's really averse to the concept of one-stop shop, that we go to one agency and that's all there is to it. The other, Mr. Chair, one that has not been touched upon, is really our ability to donate assets. And this is very pronounced within our ranks because in the BPO industry, while for the most part, for instance, one that is quite a prominent asset that we use are workstations or computers. No? So the usual lifespan of this would be 3 to 5 years. But sometimes, because of the dictates of the business, we actually have a shorter cycle for the same. So our intent is really to part with them and donate these assets. Under the CREATE law amendment that was made, Mr. Chair, we should be exempted from taxes if we donate them to schools. However, there are two issues that arise in that regard, Mr. Chair. One is, and I just want to mention that the BOC has made it difficult for us to actually undertake the donations. And it's one of implementation, Mr. Chair, because clearly it has to be based on what the current book value of the asset should be. However, from the perspective of the BOC, and I also want to clarify that this is not the entire organization that actually does this, but there have been certain instances where there is insistence on the book value that the BOC assigns, which typically is the residual value of 10% based on the Customs Modernization and Tariff Act. And the other, Mr. Chair, maybe related to that, I'll mention as well, is that we had requested, at least in the Create More amendment, that there is an expansion of the list of donees that to whom donations will be made and no imposition of the foregone taxes will be imposed. Because typically, Mr. Chair, it's not the schools that approach us. Usually, it's the LGUs that approach us on behalf of the schools that are within their jurisdiction. So sometimes it would be very difficult for us to actually undertake donations, and unfortunately, they will just be stuck, become obsolete, and even become, in certain instances, fire hazards because we don't have any place to store them, because we are limited by these two. The limitations on who can accept them tax and duty-free, and even if we have already identified who these are, the actual execution of the same. So I just wanted to make that manifestation, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Attorney Montero. And one of the outputs of this hearing is to gather all your suggestions and also put them as part of the Create More proposal. I know that in the lower house, they have, is it approved already? Or they're committee, they're discussing at the committee level. Approved na pala. They've approved it at the committee level, a proposal to amend Create, and this is what they call Create More. And when it is transmitted here to the Senate, we will use all the discussions here, your position papers, to make adjustments or to justify the need to amend Create. So that we will get all the feedbacks ahead of time and we study it. That's why we conducted this hearing. So thank you very much for that suggestion. And we'd like to request the BOC to send us a much more experienced,
Duly noted po.
member of the BOC. I know that you are a new public servant. Welcome to the world of government. But we request from the BOC to send us a much more senior and executive and who knows the discussion. We don't want to summon no less than the commissioner himself, so that he will not be belabored with all of this discussion. But we would strongly suggest to send someone who is adept to this discussion, and is also a senior officer of the BOC, or else we'll be forced to issue a summon or a subpoena to force him to come here and answer all of these questions. All right.
Duly noted po, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. So with that, again, thank you very much for your time and participation, and feel free to send us your position paper. This is a work in progress, but again, the output, one of the outputs of this is to recommend to the DOF the recommendations on the 3 resolutions. So maraming salamat po. This hearing is hereby suspended.